When they say I love you and cheat, as much as that sounds like a paradox to us, unfortunately for them, what that meant is...
Now, you're a psychologist who really focuses on actually helping a lot of men.
Yes.
And where I want to start today actually is, why is it that a man can say he loves you, he can actually seem really happy in that relationship, and then turn around and cheat on you?
Weirdly, in my experience, it is true. It's a dichotomy that took me a really long time to understand, because for me, in order to love me, you have to respect me. And cheating involves an element of disrespect that, you know, I'm sure yourself as well, we don't really tolerate. But having worked with so many men over the years, what it is that they can love you but have unmet needs. And with men, because communication isn't their forte, they don't like to communicate what these unmet needs are. So they outsource them from in another environment. So when they say I love you and cheat, as much as that sounds like a paradox to us, unfortunately for them, what that meant is I loved you. I didn't want to hurt you or upset you or tell you what was going on. So I just wanted to appease my own needs elsewhere at the expense of my relationship, which is not right. But it doesn't mean they didn't love their wife, which is really hard pill to swallow. But unfortunately, in their world, that's what it means.
So that's actually a really brilliant way of breaking it down. But then how, as women, when we're in a relationship, do we know that we can actually trust them? Because to your point, if you think that they're happy, if they're saying, oh my God, I love you, trust is a big freaking thing in that relationship. And so how do you start to communicate that? And how do you start to identify? Because I do think a guy has to take the responsibility as well, that if you're not happy, you need to speak up.
Absolutely.
But if they don't, how do you start to navigate that situation? How do you maybe even try to help prevent that situation? And how do you not take it as a personal thing? Or is it personal?
It's definitely not personal. In my experience of working with them, it's definitely not personal. How you know if you can trust them or not, one of the good ways to understand is looking at their value system before they met you. Now, if they have a set of values where if they have unmet needs, the desire to feel desired or the desire to feel intimate with somebody exceeds their desire to remain in a monogamous relationship, then chances are at some stage they're going to risk the relationship. So you really have to look at their values as a person. Now, if they're the type of person that if they want something, they'll get it and they don't mind risking it all, then in the course of a relationship, they can stray. But if they're the type of person who, as much as they might want something, they recognize that the risk is not worth the cost, and they're quite risk averse in general, and they genuinely value their wife's well-being, that person will find it difficult. Even if his wife hasn't slept with him in a long time, hasn't made him feel special, if he cares about her well-being, he doesn't put his needs first. And so that guy is less likely to cheat. Now, as a woman, how you can navigate that is sometimes some women, especially after children, they forget that the man still has needs. They forget that as tired as she is and exhausted as she is and so preoccupied, and this is no flaw of hers, it's just what happens when you become a mum. She naturally can forget that he needs a bit of attention, he needs a bit of love, he needs a bit of affection. And in her attempt to become a mother, and a fantastic mother, she can often neglect her duties as a wife. So what happens is he doesn't want to say, oh, by the way, can you stop looking after the kids and come back to me? So he might outsource it. How I recommend you navigate that is just and it's so difficult for women, but if you can make quality time to ask more open-ended questions to your partner, it makes a world of a difference. Rather than just, what time are you coming? Can you pick up the kids? Can you do this? It's like, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? What's stressing you out? You haven't been yourself. You stay attuned to your partner, they're less likely to stray. Doesn't mean they won't 100% and doesn't mean you're responsible, but they're less likely to stray. So it isn't personal, but what it is a reflection of is the communication has broken down in some way, shape or form. And is finding a time to reconnect will prevent that from getting to an affair.
Okay. I love your honesty. I know what people are thinking at home right now. In the comments, they're saying, why is it my responsibility? The guy should own it. And I actually want to be the voice of saying, you can't control them. No. You can't control if they're communicating, right? Like, people at home right now, please hear me. This isn't to blame women, but you can't control how the guy shows up. You can't force him to communicate. So I just say, in that situation, what is it that I can do? And choose to do or not do, right? I think that what you're doing right now, And it's going to be very tricky to navigate, but I think it's super important. What you're doing is you're saying, this is the way the situation is. This is how men feel, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Now as women, at least if I have the choice to say, I'm going to ask my partner if there's any needs, or I'm exhausted. No, I'm not going to ask him. Cool, don't ask him. But just know the reality of what the potential outcome is going to be. So now setting kind of that stage. You want to go back to something you just said about the value system.
Yeah.
So how do you start to identify that value system in them? I've heard you say that you can also ask them questions about their childhood that reveal how they are today.
Yeah.
So take me through what sort of things that we can ask our partners if we're dating or if we're starting or we're already in a relationship with someone to start identifying what those values are.
Okay, so great question, by the way. But what I would recommend is how you identify a man's values is you assess their kind of opinions on things that are not related to them. What I mean by this is one of the great things about our jobs is that we can kind of say, oh, someone said this today. What do you think about that? And so you might want to say something like, I read this article about men feeling neglected after a baby's born. What do you think about that? Or a colleague at work said that he feels like his wife doesn't want to have sex with him anymore. What do you feel about that? Or one common thing that a lot of people don't talk about is how men sometimes lose sexual desire for their wife after marriage, after living together. They might have been really rampant before, but they kind of lose their desire and they're not chasing their wife for sex the way they used to. And it's these kind of conversations, how you identify his values is his ability to be honest. Now, if you're with somebody who will tell you the truth, even if it hurts you, you're in luck. And as much as that might sound difficult, it actually creates emotional attunement. He's teaching you how to love him, and you do the same with him. But if you have a partner who is unable to express himself, what will happen is he'll find an outlet to express himself. Hopefully that will be a healthy outlet, but sometimes it can be an unhealthy outlet. So how you assess his value system is you assess how honest he is, even if does he stick to the truth, even if it offends some people. And if he's the type of person where truth matters to him, then chances are he'll be more honest and you can create a connection that will prevent infidelity.
So I love the idea of asking someone the questions to see how they're going to respond.
Yeah.
And then I've heard you say like that it's actually more likely that when a guy becomes a father, that they're more likely to cheat. Is that why? Because they do they feel the guilt of putting it on the mother?
Yeah.
And so they're just like, if I just go take my needs over here, now I don't have to make her feel bad that she's not giving it up.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, what happens is they recognize it is a selfish desire to expect her to be breastfeeding, looking after the baby, just push the baby out and then go and look after him. They realize, they know there's a part of them that can't always expect it, but they want it. They miss the woman they had pre-kids, because women do change after children and they become exhausted because children are exhausting. They become preoccupied with the child. They find it difficult to just kind of forget the child and let's go for dinner and just think about dinner. Whereas for a man, they can go and play football, leave the baby, and they can think about football. What they're doing is what they're thinking about. So they miss that one-to-one connection with their wife so much. They really miss it, but they don't know how to say it. And because they don't know how to say it, but they do know how to outsource it, they'll look for somewhere else. And a lot of the time after children is when men turn to pornography more, or they'll turn to escorts, or they'll turn to webcam women more, because they actually don't want to put in the effort of falling in love with another woman, but they do want to feel intimacy again. And they're looking for either a sense of vulnerability or emotional connection with somebody else, especially with these webcam girls. They talk to you and so on and so forth. So I'd want to know what is the emotion and feeling he's seeking from pornography that he isn't being able to get from us. And I would consider it a bit of pornography because it has a trickle-down effect on the relationship. They either find it more difficult to get aroused by their partner, or they're less physically attracted. So because it has an impact on my connection with him, I would consider it a bit of cheating. Would you consider it?
No, so Tom and I have very open communication, and so we talk about porn all the time. And sometimes, like, we have a rule: don't ever get offended if he asks for sex, but don't ever get offended if I say no.
Right.
And so because we've got that rule, if I say no, I still want my husband to have sexual, so I'm just like, go watch porn, babe, but like, I'm too tired.
Okay.
Right? And so because we have that communication, now I think it'd be very different if he didn't approach me, he didn't ask me for sex, and I walked in and he was sneaking it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's more about the trust, going back to that trust thing that we started with. I think that that's where it comes from, is that, hang on, you didn't trust me enough to even talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And now what's happened in our relationship where you don't feel like you can communicate that with me?
I agree with that mentality. When it is a case of I've approached you first and you're not in the mood, you're tired, or whatever, respectfully, I still have needs, I completely agree with that. But when it's a case of my wife, I haven't even approached, I haven't even discussed anything, I'm almost living a separate life, it's quite dangerous. But I also think it benefits the fact that Tom is not 25 years old. These young guys, they've been grown up with pornography and it has a real big impact on their relationships. I think after the age of 35, they can still remember what life was like without pornography. They still prefer human connection. Under 25 and under 30, they can't even remember a time where they had to put in the work to get sexual satisfaction. So that when their wife rejects them, instead of even facing the rejection, they'd rather go straight to the pornography. And that's what makes it a bit difficult.
So the key there is date someone over 35.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, unfortunately.
Okay, so in these situations where maybe you sense that the guy is straying, again, I think that the empowerment here is to be able to see the signs and then decide whether, okay, if your partner's cheating, is that something that you then forgive? Do you work through it, right? Or do you take your power and do you leave? Like, that's what I'm all about. That's why it's really important for me to talk about this cheating aspect. Because from what I hear from a lot of people that have been cheated on is they feel deflated. They feel like it is about them. They feel their insecurity goes through the roof. Their confidence, literally plummets. And then it's hard to come back from that.
Absolutely.
And so what are the signs that maybe someone can identify if they think that somebody is cheating or not?
Okay. Well, one thing I always find quite fascinating is when I have clients where the man has been cheating for 4 or 5 years, I almost, and I know this sounds negative, but I almost look at the woman and I think, how did he manage this for 4 or 5 years? What was happening to your connection where somebody could live a double life for 4 or 5 years and you didn't notice anything? And most of the time when that happens, where somebody's lived a separate life, the woman's almost clocked out of the relationship from an emotional perspective, but they're still married on paper or just lifestyle. So what I always say is if you want to rebuild after an affair, or if you want to know someone's having an affair, you have to look at your emotional connection with each other. If you have an emotional connection with each other where on a daily basis you're connecting, you're speaking to each other, you're emotionally, physically, spiritually connected, it's difficult for that person to stray without you realizing. You'll notice within a day or two. Something will be off. His eye contact will be different to you. Everything will be different. But if you're two people who are living separate lives, you won't spot the signs because you haven't emotionally invested in each other. This is man or women. There are men out there that don't realize when their wife is having an affair because they haven't taken the time to notice what she's up to that day, how often she calls, what she wears, and so on and so forth. So when you are so emotionally and psychologically connected to your partner, it's very little that they can do without you recognizing a change. So essentially, it's just a change in behavior. If you see any change in your partner's behavior to how they used to be, and that is emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, your intimacy's changed, then you know there might be new energy entering their world. But if you remain connected, you'll be able to spot that quite early on, and you won't have situations where you're blindsided.
Yeah, I've even heard you say, like, they may even be happier.
Yeah, unfortunately, they might find, because sometimes some people are so starved of attention from the person they love, when they finally get it, and in any form, even if that new person is really toxic, if they finally get attention, they have a kick in their step and they're all excited to go to work, or they just seem happier. But more often, they're more hostile to their partner. Yeah, that's more often the case. They're hostile. And the reason they tend to be hostile is essentially we all know cheating is wrong. Yeah, even if you grow up with the philosophy that men can cheat, whatever it is, if you have to live a double life, you feel inauthentic. You feel some element of guilt. And the only way to feel less guilty in that moment is to blame your wife. So a lot of men will say, look, she doesn't even cook for me, or look, she doesn't even look after herself, or look, she didn't remember it was my birthday, or look what she did for me on Christmas, nothing compared to my mistress. So what will happen is they'll start being negative towards their wife. They'll start getting critical over small things to remove their element of shame and guilt. So they can be quite ratty for no reason.
So they can be happier in general, but they're more ratty towards you. Oh, that's so freaking confusing.
Yeah, I know.
Because honestly, if my husband came home and he was happy, it's like, oh, I'm so happy happy that you're happy,
Yeah.
babe. Like you know, like, so I would perceive it to be the other way.
Yeah, I would as well. But then the connection with you should be happier. If he's doing well at work and he's doing well in his fitness, and then you two are having better sex and you two, everything is trickling into your relationship, amazing. But if he seems to be all excited about getting dressed up and is going to the gym, but when you ask him for quality time, he acts like you're a burden, then you're like, there's a discrepancy between what's going on in your life and how you're treating me. Is something up? And don't be afraid to have that conversation. It doesn't have to be an accusation. It could just be, talk to me, what's going on?
So not just like, hey, you cheating.
Try not to. I don't do that. I go straight to the jugular. But if you can avoid me...
What do you do?
I assume the worst. I always assume the worst. This is a problem I have, is and I've gotten better. It takes me, you know, when somebody builds trust for such a long time, you realize it's a you problem. But for many, many years, the moment any sign of difference, I would interpret it as there is infidelity going on. Isn't that strange?
Yeah. So I love that you said that, honestly, because as a psychologist who this is literally what you do for a living, even you, and you're like, I've heard you say something like, I know so much about the red flags that almost now everything becomes a red flag.
Yeah.
So how actually help me work through that, and everyone at home, because I love talking about the red flags. How do I identify, right? Going back to how do I control my own life? How do I start spotting things that my partner or someone's doing, and then now identify things so that I have the control to then act the way I want to act? But when everything now seems like a red flag, it can, you even said, like, it can actually become now detrimental to your relationship. So how do you work through that?
Personally or people?
Both.
Both. Okay, well, here's the thing. I start with red flag. Try your best to identify your own red flags first. Always. The reason why it's always good to identify your own red flags is then you don't have to control people. When you have self-control and self-awareness, you don't have to control people. If I know I have a tendency to attach to men that use me because I like to feel needed in a relationship. I feel more special when I do everything for a man, and then at least I create a dependency and that makes me feel loved. If I know that's a red flag in me, I'm naturally going to attract a narcissist. I'm naturally going to attract a taker. If I'm constantly leaving my door open and take everything I've got, I'm going to attract a taker. So if I create better boundaries for my own red flags, it means you can have a red flag, you can have a red flag, you can have a red flag, but you're not going to enter my world because I know I've got my armors up for that sort of stuff. So I'd try and recognize your own red flags. And then when you're assessing people, everybody's going to have red flags here and there, but you just have to recognize what's a deal breaker for you. There's character flaws and then there's deal breakers. Everybody's going to have character flaws. Some people might be late, some people might be messy, some people might not be as intelligent as you like, but deal breakers might be, I don't want somebody who can't regulate their emotions and gets too angry. I can't cope with that. I can't cope with somebody who doesn't check in on me and doesn't even see if I'm good or bad, just gets on with their day and is super independent. I can't be with someone who's disloyal. Once you know your deal breakers, instead of focusing on all the things that you love about a man, just focus on the deal breakers. He could be amazing on a million things, but if he's got even one of your deal breakers, the relationship will deteriorate. But if he's got none of the deal breakers, and maybe he's not the most handsome person in the world, or maybe he's not the most successful, but he's got no deal breakers, that person is a green flag. So just know your own red flags and your own deal breakers, and you'll be good to go.
Oh, I love that. What are your red flags for yourself then?
Personally, I'm super insecure. Super, super insecure. And I've worked on it for quite some time and it always pops back up. I always think I'm under control, but every now and then something will happen. Maybe there'll be some distance, or maybe there'll be I haven't heard from him for a while, or whatever it is. My brain will go to the negative. It will assume that equals you're going to leave me and hurt me. So then I start to get emotionally hostile. So I'll say, this means that means this is what you're going to do, I know it. And it's that mentality that over the years I've had to kind of work on, because it's so destructive. You're almost predicting the problems, because the thing is, when you're insecure, you'd rather be right than be happy. Unfortunately. So you'd rather predict all the problems and say, you're going to do this to me, I'm going to go now, and self-sabotage, than just trust the process and accept you might be wrong. And you might be wrong. They might be perfect for me. Maybe you're the problem. So now over the years, I've learned that I'm often wrong. And it's good to know that.
Wow, you really hit me with that. That was so powerful. I think especially if you've been through the heartbreak though,
Yeah.
because you remember how that feels.
Yeah.
You don't want it to happen again. So now it's like actually being right is almost soothing. Going back to like how you are kind of feeling control. When someone's cheating on you, when someone's like either manipulating you or like just like mind fucking you. I'm not even sure what other word to use. It doesn't feel good. And so you never want to get back there again. And so because you don't want to get back there again, it's actually... it is self-soothing sometimes to see, I was right, versus let me let go, let me trust this person and have the opportunity for them to break my heart.
Exactly that. Because here's the thing, you know, with pain, physical or psychological, if we can predict it, it's less painful. So what people do who believe that they're going to get hurt by whoever they're with, they'll pick somebody that they know is going to hurt them. They might pick somebody who's married. They might pick someone who's got a history of being unfaithful. They might pick somebody who's emotionally unavailable. At least they know the pain they're about to receive, and they put an expiration date on the relationship before it starts. It's their way of ensuring that they'll be single again. Whereas when somebody has high self-esteem, they don't want to pick a poison. They don't want to pick pain. They want to pick a form of connection. So when you've got low self-esteem and you're insecure, unfortunately what you'll do is self-sabotage by picking the person that's going to hurt you in the most familiar way, in the way that you can know and recognize and navigate. And that's why women will go from one narcissistic relationship to another abusive relationship to another cheater and to another cheater, because they're unconsciously picking the pain to reoccur so that they self-sabotage and find themselves single again, unfortunately.
Wow, that's really hard, yeah. Is it more likely then, as a predictor, that if they've cheated on someone in the past, they're going to cheat on you?
Yes.
Really?
Unfortunately. And it's not a case of because you should always judge everybody with that, you know, paint everybody with that same brush, especially if it was when they were super young and they haven't done it since. You know, there are exceptions to the rule. But usually when somebody cheats, what that suggests is cheating is a coping mechanism. When things are getting difficult in their relationship, rather than confronting it head on and trying to find a way of resolving the issue, they would rather seek a way of numbing the pain and outsourcing somebody else. So they've used cheating as a coping mechanism. And the only way you'll know that they've changed is if they found new coping mechanisms. So if they found a new way to cope with any kind of stress in a relationship, then you can trust them. But if they haven't and they still have communication issues, they still have that kind of trust issue, whatever it is, chances are they'll go to what they know is the easiest way to soothe the pain from when a relationship is falling apart. And if it's been cheating in the past, they'll stick to that.
One of the biggest fallacies is that relationships shouldn't be work. Say what? We put time, effort, and hard work into growing our careers or our business, but love should just happen? After 20 years of being married, all starts with being willing to ask and answer hard questions. I have a free downloadable PDF for you for a happy, successful, lasting love. Click the link below for free access to the most important questions you must ask your partner PDF. Oh yeah, God, that really hit home. So before I met Tom, I was dating this guy and I was with him for about 3 years, or 3 to 4 years. And we would have these massive rows, right? And he would be verbally abusive and it was just very toxic and turbulent. And then of course, I mean, I was like 16, 17 years old at the time, but then he would come back and say, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. And then of course he would do it again and then I'd leave him and then he would say, oh my God, I'll never do it again. And you so want to believe, like you really want to believe this person's changed. But to your point, what have they done in order to change?
Yeah, unfortunately, they have to show a shift in their values. And that doesn't come so easy, and particularly doesn't come with the person who forgives them. Unfortunately, this is the paradox of life. When you forgive a behavior, essentially you give permission for that behavior to reoccur unless you set new boundaries. If you forgive that behavior and there's been no change in boundaries, what will happen is we think we're showing them forgiveness and kindness, and of course they're going to appreciate it and come back with a new personality. They're thinking, I found somebody dumb enough to accept me in my worst form. I'm never letting this person go. So they end up coming back to you, not out of love, but purely because they don't feel like anybody else would accept their unacceptable behavior. And so they come back out of that. And we stupidly think because they love us so much, but really it's because they found somebody dumb enough to accept their unacceptable behavior.
Have you been cheated on before?
I haven't, which is so strange considering my radar and my anxiety towards it. You would think I've been cheated on loads. I actually have never experienced it. Not that I know of, is what I should say. It's not that I know of, but I would imagine it's because, and you know, when I ask my partner, like, oh, you know, and he said, you make it so difficult to cheat on you. Even if I wanted to, it's so difficult because you kind of predict all the problems and do all of these things. I'm so wary of it, which is a really bad way to live, by the way. It's not a healthy way to live, but that I almost kind of make it like it's not even worth the trouble, because if you were to do it, she'll know within a minute and she'll make a big deal. I haven't been cheated on, but I have an intense fear of abandonment. But so cheating for some reason is my biggest fear, even though I've never experienced it. And from working with couples, you can cope with it. No one dies from a partner that cheats. Personally, I just find it a really difficult situation. Have you ever been cheated on?
Not that I know of. And well, but back when I was in my teen years, so yes, I guess I have been cheated on technically. But as far as I know, he didn't sleep with anyone. That was his thing. It was just a snog, a club for snogging for all the Americans is basically a French kiss. So he was going clubbing with his mates, and I'm just like, oh, well, he says he loves, going back to literally where we started, he said that he loved me. He says that, you know, I'm his forever girl. And so of course he's not going to cheat on me. And then when I found out, it was a store, it was sobbing, he was crying, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. And I was so insecure. That was going back to, like, I was so insecure because he was my first boyfriend. I was bullied for my looks as a kid. He used to tell me, no one's ever going to love you as much as I love you. And I believed him. Like, I had such low self-esteem. And so that's why I really wanted to talk to you specifically about this subject, because I somewhat knows how it feels when you can have your heart broken and you can trust somebody and they can actually, you know, really use that to your point. And I want to make sure that people hear at home what you mean. It's not that you are dumb. It's that they think of you as being dumb enough to then fall for it again.
What it is.
And I eventually had to build my self-esteem. I had to build my confidence. And then I had to set boundaries to be like, no, this shit ain't gonna fly anymore, homie. Like, it's just not gonna fly. And it was once I did that I actually was like, why the hell am I with this doofus? Like, and that's when I ended up leaving.
Did it cause any trust issues when you first met Tom, or did you manage to park that up? Amazing.
Yeah, I think because I'd already built my self-esteem, I built my confidence, that when I met Tom, I was like, so I'm not gonna take this, I'm not gonna take this, I'm not gonna take this, you know, like, this is who I am. And I did it with, I think, confidence. Now, I've been together with Tom for 23 years, and it has been a stacking stone of building the trust over the years. Because I was worried about, like, you know, what if he takes my heart and breaks it? But I realized, like, I sat there and had almost like one of those moments where I was like, okay, you can choose this path, you can choose this path. One path was you can go in this relationship and always have, like, you know, the red flags up and they're like your eye, like, you know, like detecting, or I can just give myself over. And again, as an adult, I didn't have heartbreak, so I understand why that also may be different. But I just chose to give myself over to Tom.
But you also chose wisely in your partner selection.
Oh yeah, talk to me about that actually.
Yeah, because the thing is, as much as you can trust and so on and so forth, when you choose wisely, that really helps let go. For me, that's really worked. When you find somebody, when you choose wisely, the battle is halfway won. Like, a lot of the times what women want to do is they come to me and they're just like, I just want to work on myself because I keep getting anxious about my partner and so on and so forth. But when you look at the partner, they've got very good reasons to be anxious. Comes home late all the time, he doesn't check in, he doesn't really show her concern, and they want to fix themselves. But when you choose correctly, what will happen is you don't need to kind of fix yourself. The relationship is relatively smooth. You'll have ups and downs, but you'll have both of you will want to make the relationship work, and both of you have that joint effort to want to make each other happy. But when you pick badly, it's like you're kind of holding on for dear life with this person, begging them to behave, but they're not going to, unfortunately. So have a look at your selection process. And you chose great with Tom. Like I was telling Lisa before I started, every interview I've ever watched with Tom, he genuinely shows so much admiration and love for his wife in every opportunity he gets to praise his wife. And it's so genuine and so sincere that with somebody like that, how would you get trust issues? to the world. He's not just saying it closed to you to please you. It's just how his mind thinks. His mind's in a constant state of positive admiration for his wife. How amazing is that?
Thank you. I do also think that I love that, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it makes me feel very good. But I do think it is because I gave him non-negotiables when we first met.
Yeah.
I said, so I actually want to talk about forgiveness because I said to him, I have zero judgment on women that forgive guys.
Yeah.
Like zero judgment. You need to live the life that you want.
Yeah.
And so if your partner has betrayed you, had an affair or whatever, and you choose to go back, that is your decision to make. No one should freaking judge you for it.
Yeah.
I'm just not that woman.
Right.
And I knew that from
like
the
this
get-go.
as well.
And
What makes you like that?
I know people very close to me who've been devastated by being cheated on.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't ever, like as a kid, I just remember seeing it. And I was like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And so it was my thing. And so I just let him know, hey, look, I'm not that person that will take you back. Just like, I love you, but you need to know, if I find out on a Monday at 10 a.m. that you've cheated on me, at 10:01, I'm packing my bags. I'm literally not hearing you out.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear why. I don't want to hear, because I'm giving myself over to you. Going back to what I said, when you can give yourself over to someone and I'm like, I'm trusting you 1,000%. I'm trusting you with my vulnerabilities. I'm trusting you with my secrets. I'm trusting you with my insecurities. And in order for me to do that, you need to know these are my non-negotiables. And so by 10:01, I'm packing my bags. 10:02, I'm out the freaking door.
Right.
You'll never see or hear from me again. Period. So I was very clear.
Amazing.
I was very clear.
You know, I would say it's probably because you give your all to your husband.
Yeah.
When the women that forgive, in my experience, tend to be ones that recognize they didn't give their all. They recognize that throughout the relationship, they took their foot off the pedal. They probably weren't really checking in if he's good or not good. They weren't seeing him very regularly. Sometimes they might go a long time without seeing each other. They weren't prioritizing even their own health. They weren't really looking after themselves in any way, shape, or form, didn't want sex. So those women, when they come to me about the affair, they're actually coming with a bit of curiosity. That curiosity leads to forgiveness. They're coming with, instead of complete anger, they've turned that into, I understand I wasn't really there for him. How do I now fix this? How do I also help fix this? Now, the women that have given it their all, 100%, they've done everything for that man. They haven't left any stone unturned. They're less forgiving. They're like, I've given you my all. I've never strayed on you. I've never even thought about another man. And I've given you everything. If that's not good enough, bye. But the ones that know that, unfortunately, they got a little bit too complacent, they're the ones that are slightly more willing to forgive. And I always say that only forgive if you're not going to use the remainder of the relationship to punish him. If you're going to forgive and then be angry, furious, bring it up, swear at him, if you're going to do all of that, just leave. Yeah, it's just easier. But if you're going to forgive, but then you start a new relationship with each other and try your best to show up again as you did in the beginning, then give it another try.
All right, so I'm going to be the voice of someone in my audience right now saying, but I really did give it my all. Yeah. Like, Sadia, I gave it my all, and he still freaking cheated on me, and I went back to him. What? My mind goes to, and again, this could be complete naivety on my part, but just thinking back of me going back to my boyfriend over and over and over again, it was the insecurity that I had in myself. Because he was saying to me, like manipulating me, saying no one's ever going to love you like I did, I'd really believed him. Yeah. And I started to think, oh my God. Like, because then when he was sorry, it was lavish, right? Yeah. It was like, I love you. I'll do anything. Like, I'll come pick you up. I'll buy you flowers. Like, it was so over the top that in that moment of, it wasn't necessarily the cheating, but in that moment of like, he screamed at me or he called me a name and now he's really sorry, because I had the insecurity of, but what if someone doesn't love me as much as he does? I kept going back to him. Do you think that that's a possibility as well?
Absolutely. Well, I would say in that case where you have given it all, and it does happen because some men are just that way inclined, and you've given it your all and he still does it to you and he still abuses you or whatever it is. What I say to women in that case, you just have to pick your suffering. If you're going to stay with this man, you're going to suffer in the form of knowing he might do it again, not appreciate what you've done for him and humiliate you and hurt you again. That's a form of suffering. If you become single, you might not meet somebody, you might not, you might be lonely. that's another form of suffering. You have to pick the suffering that has the best outcome for you. Personally, I would say being lonely for a little while, hurt, a bit depressed, and then the potential outcome of meeting someone healthy for you or raising your own self-esteem is a better long-term outcome. I would pick that suffering if you can. But if you prefer the suffering of staying in a relationship with somebody that might cheat again and again, might hurt you, but at least you know what you're doing every day, and at least you've got the comfort and consistency of this is my man, then pick that suffering. Don't focus on what you like, focus on what you can take. And if you can take it, carry on. But if you can't, just trust that suffering will have a positive outcome if you have to start again.
Ooh, that was so fire, girl. Okay, so you said don't hold it against them then. You can't hold on to it and punish them. I think that's super important. How do you actually then come back from that?
What you have to do in that moment is try and understand, like you're almost starting from scratch, and even try and understand what was he seeking from that affair? What was it that he was seeking? Now, sometimes some men are just seeking to be desired again by a pretty young girl. They just want to feel like they get an ego boost. Now, the reality is it's hard to recreate that feeling in your relationship. I'm never going to be a 19-year-old Swedish model, so I can't do that for you. So that's going to be a difficult one, and that's a low self-esteem and an ego issue in him. So he has to resolve that within himself. But if it's a case of he was seeking a lot of more conversation, he was seeking quality time, he was seeking somebody that would make him feel seen again because he hasn't felt that in a while, then you can regain that. But then she'll also have needs. I need somebody who makes me feel desired again, and I need somebody who makes me feel seen and somebody who cares about my well-being. So you both negotiate a new contract. But if the desire or the need he was seeking outside of the relationship is one that you can't build in yours, there's no point. You can't build the trust again, unfortunately.
Oh God, that's so strong. I've heard you say that everyone basically has a potential of cheating.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Unfortunately, well, the thing is, I've never been a cheat. But the reason why I say that is because I try not to put any bad behavior aside from myself as well. It's not my nature to, but who knows? I've never been in a situation where I've got 5 kids with somebody, I can't physically leave them, so but I'm not happy and I feel unwanted, but then somebody else makes me feel loved. I've never been in those circumstances. So it's really easy to say, I would never do that, I would never do this. But reality is you haven't been tested. If you feel like you would never do something, it's because you haven't had those testing conditions yet. Give it time. Anybody can do anything given the right or wrong conditions. So what I would say is everybody has a potential. What prevents you is creating the right conditions that doesn't push that behavior. Do you think you ever would have the ability to cheat or anything?
No, until I heard you say that, and I was like, do I?
Yeah, I don't have it naturally. It doesn't come naturally to me.
No.
So if I did, it would have to be extreme circumstances. But I can understand in somebody's extreme circumstances. Personally, I try not to be in extreme circumstances.
But I really do think through that, because it was like really interesting when I heard you say, and I actually have a quote of yours, you said your moral compass is dependent on your conditions.
It is, yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that's really strong. So I started to think, okay, I know my moral compass. And I was like, but even in my conditions at the worst, so that scenario that you just said, right? I would say, I'm now disconnected from my husband. I would rather leave him and deal with that and then find somebody than ever be the person that would be the person that broke someone else's heart.
Yeah, me too. I'm personally a lot of that because I have no fear of being alone. But I also, I happen to be an educated woman who has the ability to make my own money. If I was somebody who wasn't that and didn't have the ability to make my own money and had to start again and didn't have family around me and had all these kids, but then I don't know what I would do. So it's really like incumbent on your conditions. So that's why I try not to judge everybody, but I would tell everybody, if you can, avoid the art of cheating because it creates such an inauthentic. You start to dislike yourself. You start to dislike the person you become because you either have to be somebody else to please the person you're having an affair with or somebody else to avoid being caught in the house. Either way, you're not being yourself. Yeah. Either way, you're losing touch with you and you start to feel emotionally exhausted. So I would recommend always, if you can avoid it, always avoid it.
Well, speaking of not feeling yourself, I've seen certain women that I'm just like, she's such a badass, she's really strong, and then jealousy comes and it literally makes them a different human. So talk to me about jealousy jealousy.
Yeah.
You've obviously said that you're insecure.
Yeah.
So how do you handle it? I assume that leads to jealousy?
Yeah, do you know what? One thing I would say is my jealousy, I have zero jealousy outside of a relationship. So I'm so happy for people. I'm so excited, and especially with other women, I'm never jealous. But when it comes to a relationship, because I put so much emotional effort into it, I get jealous. I get jealous very quickly and easily. I've gotten a lot better. But I remember back in the day, I would get jealous particularly about somebody's past. I would have retroactive jealousy, where I would think about somebody's ex and constantly compare myself to the ex, constantly wonder what their connection was like, constantly wonder what it was, why did they break up, are they going to get back together? And the reason I had that is because usually the partner didn't give me any current reasons to be jealous. But because of my own insecurity, I wanted to find a cause for that insecurity. It's too painful to accept that, Sadia, you just have a problem and you haven't worked through your issues. It's easier to say, oh, he's still in love with his ex. So what I would do is create a reason to be jealous. And if I couldn't find it in something that's going on present, I would find it in the past. So if you do suffer from that, it might be an internal issue that you need to work on, because that is quite a common thing, like thinking and comparing yourself to exes. And it's usually when there's not a current problem.
Oh, so this is fascinating. Take me through that then. So Sadia starts dating a guy.
Yeah.
You said you've worked through it now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So take me back to the old Sadia.
Old Sadia.
So you've met a guy,
Yeah.
you really like him, you seem like a very confident woman. I know you said that you've got insecurities, which I
Yeah.
completely understand that we most all have,
Yeah.
even if we appear confident. So you start to research his ex.
Yeah.
And you see photos online, I assume,
Yeah.
on Instagram. How do you then work through it? Or how would you work through it now in hindsight to address that, hey, this is a jealousy move, it doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve your relationship, so that doesn't become a crippling factor in your relationship?
What I would say is you have a core belief in you that is limiting you. What it might be is that you might be thinking, I have to be beautiful to attract this man, or I have to be very nurturing to attract this man. I have to be something to attract this man. And then when you realize that that's exhausting, you find excuse like his ex and think, well, is she more beautiful, or is she more this, is she more that? Just to kind of like reinforce that core belief that love is conditional. So what you have to do is remove the idea of comparing yourself to other people by recognizing that even if that person is more beautiful, less beautiful, they're not you. So you don't have to be so jealous. Just like I might like sugar, I might really love sugar. There might be 2 pieces of cake, but the overall ingredients of a red velvet cake is what makes me like that cake more than a fudge cake. Similarly, you might be beautiful, intelligent, all these things, but if you're comparing yourself to another person on just one attribute, you're always going to feel insecure. But if you recognize that there's a plethora of ingredients that make you you, and you yourself is unique and irreplaceable, you'll be less likely to compare yourself with other people. But if you think you only have one quality to offer a man, every woman is your competition. But if you recognize that everything you work on, all your attributes is what makes you desirable, you'll realize that there's no competition because there's no you. So I always say try and work on other attributes of yourself that would make you less insecure if you can.
Oh, I love that, because when I think about, for me with Tom, it was very much, of course there's always women more beautiful. Like there's 7.5 billion people in the world at this point. And it's like, for me to think that I'm always going to be the most attractive, or he's only going to think I'm the only woman that's attractive, like it just isn't realistic. So I always, again, going back to like, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but this is so important to say, like I just deal with the world the way it is, not the way that I wish it was. And so I go, okay, if the world is that, of course there's going to be women that are beautiful. I'm 44 years old. So like, of course there's going to be more women that are going to be younger, hotter, fitter, bigger boobs, like bigger butt, all of the things. I would just, my self-esteem would just plummet. Like I just would have zero confidence. So I go, okay, to your point, what are the other things that I have to offer? And then how do I keep showing up? Because I'm just going to be honest, and I tell myself this, insecurities isn't sexy.
Yeah, it really is.
Confidence is freaking sexy. And so I remind myself that in the moments of insecurity, I go, hey, Lisa, are you... Right now, if you're trying to be like appealing, you're not, because you're insecure. And then it really does come to, I built my own self-esteem off my own back. Without Tom, without him around, without my business, without money, without success, I just built my confidence. And so what does that mean? How do I just show up every day, knowing that I could fail, knowing that I could have, acne, knowing that my hair can fall out. Like I had over a year where I was very, I had massive gut issues.
Yeah.
So my hair was falling out, my nails were brittle, and I felt terrible about myself. So in that assessment of, I don't feel sexy, I feel super insecure in those moments, I was like, oh, it's your hormones.
Yeah.
Work on your health, work on your hormones. Be the person that got up today and looked at my blood levels, or be the person, right? So I started to build my confidence in being the person that told myself I was going to do something and then follow through. That was one piece. So it becomes these little notches of confidence that I would do.
Well, you became a problem solver.
Yes.
That's what confidence is essentially you take all the problems in your life and instead of seeking ways to numb yourself or go into denial or just seeking highs, you problem solve. And then if some things can't be solved, you accept the outcome. That's what I mean by that is I might problem solve, let's say I don't like my weight. Instead of going into denial or worrying about it or just seeking quick, fixes, I learn how to manage my weight. I problem solve that situation. Now, if some problems are beyond me, I just accept some problems are beyond me and I just accept the outcome of that problem not being solved. But what creates lack of confidence is you have a bunch of problems, but you have no way of resolving them and you don't exercise any self-control or any methodology to resolve those problems. So you become overwhelmed. And in that moment of overwhelmness, you seek your partner to make you feel confident again, when really it has to come from your own problem-solving ability. So if you're ever struggling with your weight, with your health, with your appearance, with your income, whatever it is, with your friendships, until you problem solve them, you're always going to lack confidence.
Well, I've never actually thought of it like that.
I love it. You problem solved everything.
I love that word. Look, I'm by far not perfect. Like I do not want everyone to think that I show up every day utterly confident. I don't. But what I do is I know what it feels like to be confident. And so, like, even my jewelry, it's my way of suiting up to build my confidence. Yeah. And then it becomes when you work on yourself, it is a reflection of then how you show up in that relationship.
Yeah.
So going back to the jealousy thing, if I started to even think about being jealous, I'd be like, oh, Lisa, this is a you thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure everyone at home right now is freaking out because I said it's a you thing. Obviously, there's going to be something, and you mentioned it earlier, that the person, your partner can be doing things that are very clear red freaking flags. So that isn't a you thing. No. That is you identifying that these are red flags. Yeah. But if there isn't a red flag, then I start to ask myself, how are you showing up? But the jealousy thing, when I've seen women completely become a different human, like they go from happy, bubbly, they seem confident, and then now I've had friends who've done drive-bys, right? And what I mean by that is like, he said he was out, I'm going to drive by his apartment to see if his car's still there. Yeah. And I'm like, either you trust him or you ask him, hey, are you telling the truth? But this is actually a debate, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then checking partners' phones. Yeah. What's your belief on checking your partner's phone? And so even you said earlier as well, you're insecure even now. Yeah. So your partner, there's no room for him cheating because you always you're always on top of that. What does that actually look like? Yeah, okay. And is that you checking his phone? Is that you checking his Instagram?
I'm actually a big advocate against checking phones. And the reason being is I've had my phone checked. It's a big violation when you don't know the context. And also the other thing is, because I know I'm jealous, I mitigate and limit the things that will cause me pain. Oh. I don't look for pain because I already cause myself enough stress with that stuff. So I actually don't believe in checking phones. What I do believe instead is when you get that urge to check somebody's phone, recognize what's changed in your intimacy. Something's changed that's making you want to check his phone. Something's happened, either that he's holding it differently, he's maneuvering differently, or your connection in general has changed and it's making you insecure. So if you're feeling the need to check the phone, check in on your intimacy. Have that conversation first and do all of those things. Now, if you're one of those people that really needs proof, really needs proof before you can do everything, what I would say is you're probably not strong enough to walk away anyway. If you're one of those people that needs red-handed evidence, you're probably going to find the evidence and not walk away. So what is the point of doing that? Only check the phone. I don't recommend it. If you've got the strength to walk away. If you've got the strength to walk away, you shouldn't even need to check the phone. Have the conversation. But usually what I find is the people that want to catch their partner just to show that they're not going insane, but then they don't have the willingness to walk away. Now, I think the women that have the willingness to walk away, before it even gets to the red-handed conversation, you're doing enough for me to not like this relationship. You're coming home a bit late, you're hiding your phone, you're doing enough for me to want to walk away. I don't need to check the phone to know that this is not a relationship that makes me feel good. But the ones that don't have the willingness to walk away and don't have the strength to walk away, they do all these micromanaging behaviors. And that's men and women, they do that. They micromanage rather than just walk away. It's better to, instead of going down that toxic route, just walk away beforehand.
Well, okay, so you actually just said something that made me think, well, what about the gaslighting?
Yeah.
Where we know many men
Yeah.
that will gaslight women that to make them, no, it's you. You're going crazy. I can't believe you're jealous. What
Yeah.
the, right? And so they'll freaking gaslight you
Yeah.
in making you think it's all you. So what would you do in that moment? Because sometimes you don't actually know, like, is it me? Am I going crazy? Like, you start to actually doubt yourself.
You know what? I try and reserve judgment on what to do in those situations because I don't know what I would do. And this is somebody who's from a professional background. I still don't know what I would do. What I have seen people do is they record conversations between them and their partner. And the reason they record conversations is because they actually want to see, am I the problem? Am I doing something? And when they record the conversations and they listen back, they see an abuser, a bully, and a victim, and then they realize. So I do understand that gaslighting can make you want to look for evidence, but I think better than looking for evidence is look for help. Either speak to somebody like a friend or somebody that you trust, or speak to a professional. Seek help first. A professional will give you an objective perspective if you are to blame or if it's them. If once you've sought an objective perspective, that should give you more clarity. Going down the route of checking phones and stuff, unfortunately, it can leave you with a PTSD that you don't know how to cope with afterwards.
Wow.
I've seen people who've seen pictures that they can't get out of their head, or they've read messages that they can't believe, and they can forgive everything else except what they saw. So sometimes it's more damage than it's worth. So I would recommend speaking to someone first.
Interesting. Okay, so sorry, I interrupted you. So how do you, I don't want to say monitor your boyfriend?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I think the main thing I do is I check in a lot. And I recognize if there's any way of where we're being disconnected in any way, shape or form. We're always in contact or stuff like that. And that makes it very difficult for us to live separate lives. It would be very difficult for me to do anything and for him to do anything because we don't live separate lives. So I think it's that creating one life together as whilst having your independent space, but having one life together prevents anyone straying too far.
Well, where do you draw that fine line then of checking in and then being obsessive? Like, where are you? What time? Hang on, you haven't texted me back. 5 minutes later, hey, where are you? You said that you were going to call me.
I think when the conversations are soothing, it doesn't get to neurotic. What I mean by that is if you call Tom in the morning and he's at work and he's like, babe, I'm just in a meeting, I'll call you back in just an hour. What will happen is it can go 2 hours, you won't notice. But when he's ignoring you, or he's like, oh, fuck's sake, can you just leave me alone for a minute? Of course you're going to become neurotic. So I would say the fine line becomes on the context of the conversation. If it's soothing, it will never cross boundaries. But if that conversation is hostile, then it turns into something more negative.
Oh, yeah, that makes complete sense. I have never checked Tom's phone, and I absolutely...
Has he ever checked yours?
No.
No, I've never had that.
And the thing is that I do believe if I ever feel, and it's not that I, again, have the perfect marriage, but if I ever felt the inclination to need to check it, I would go to what's wrong in your marriage that you feel like you need to check his phone in the first place.
Would you ever check it, do you think? If it
No,
ever got
no,
I just don't think I would.
I would speak to him, right? I would say, hey, babe, I have a weird feeling that I really want to check your phone because of this one text message or this one thing. And so I think we need to talk about why I don't trust you right now. Like, I think I would actually say those words to him.
But do you think it's because you've had a open connection around the phone? I think what happens, I always say, is your phone should be available, but not necessarily accessible. What I mean by that is, babe, can you pass me my phone? Or babe, can you just check that last message? When you have that kind of relationship with each other, no one feels so much need. But when it's so unavailable and it's so hidden, that usually creates that worry. But one thing I have noticed, I've had this a couple of times from clients. I'll have female clients that say, I had a dream that I should go through his phone, and I went through his phone and I found God knows what. Isn't that so weird?
It's your subconscious, I'm sure, right?
Yeah,
your subconscious is...
but they end up being right from the dream. But weirdly, and I hate to say this because I don't want people to start overthinking, getting paranoid with their dreams. But unfortunately, it's not necessarily that their dreams are always right, but the feeling that they're getting in the dream is very much mirrored in the feelings that they're having in real life. So sometimes I have clients, it's weird how women's intuition works.
Yeah.
It's scary.
It's freaking strong,
it's
homie.
So scary. It scares me how sometimes, but it's really difficult because women, we don't know the difference between intuition and insecurity. Intuition, it could be just there's some reality in that. Insecurity is usually past behaviors expecting your current position. So intuition could be something that's you've never felt it before, but for some reason you're feeling it now. That's probably an intuition. Insecurity is you bring this baggage with you in every relationship, in every situation. It's familiar. You do this a lot. So don't confuse intuition and insecurity.
That's fascinating. I think of intuition. So I've heard many people say, it's just the gut feeling. And I'm like, but I think it's trained.
Yeah.
Like from birth, if you look someone in the eye and they look away, I'm 44, like I said, over 44 years, it's taught me, if they look away when I ask them an uncomfortable question, it means they're uncomfortable. Yeah. So there's these micro expressions that you start to pick up, but they're so micro, it doesn't necessarily seep in as a conscious thought.
Right.
And so think about back in the days, in the caveman days, right, where women, I used this analogy the other day, but if you hear like a rustle in the forest, right, or in the jungle, it's usually, a wild animal that's going to eat you and the family.
Yeah.
So if you hear a rustle, your instinct goes, oh shit, I remember the last time Aunt Jane heard the rustle and her family got eaten, so the rustle means that there's possible danger. And now what happens is you go, why do I feel like there's danger? Because your subconscious maybe heard the rustle in the jungle. Yeah. So I kind of think of that as being like a muscle that we've just trained in so many things, but we don't realize. Yeah. So your intuition now is screaming at you, pay attention, because maybe it's taken in all these small micro expressions over time that maybe your partner's been given that you haven't even identified as red flags, going back to something we were talking about earlier.
It's usually your soul is speaking to you.
Yeah.
What happens every time you ignore your soul and you just go by ego, you're driven by this person makes me feel good, this person makes me look good, this person is better than being alone, your soul will kind of gnaw at you until you speak to it, until you listen to it. And your soul will always tell you what's good for you and what's not good for you. And that doesn't mean you have to have a big blowout fight and you have to check their phones or anything like that. You just have to remember what's serving you and not serving you. And also, but be fair and rational. Don't assume that, because I'm so irrational, I like to be on the side of try not to...
You said you're irrational?
I'm irrational, yeah. So because I like to err on the side of being fair. Being fair. Are you sure this person deserves this level of scrutiny? Now, if the answer is definitely yes, absolutely, then you can take you can take action. But if they don't and it's your own traumas, try not to punish people for things that they didn't do or didn't cause in you.
All right, so take me through that actual experience. So you start to feel irrational. How do you know it's irrational? Because sometimes when you feel irrational, it doesn't necessarily compute in your head that you're irrational, because sometimes that emotion feels very real.
Yeah. Your emotion is caused by more assumptions than realities. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, my partner hasn't replied to a message. I could easily start to get angry around this, that, and the other. But the anger, where's that coming from? Well, I'm making assumptions that it must be someone's doing this, someone's doing that. There's more assumptions behind the emotion. But if it's reality, I've literally seen that a picture on Instagram where he's doing something, or I've seen, then it's not really, then it's not an emotion, it's just a reaction to what's happening in what we're faced with, the realities we're faced with. So if you want to assess whether that emotion is accurate, ask yourself, am I making assumptions or am I reality testing? If there's more realities, then it's accurate.
Oh, I love that. I'm such like a tactical person in these moments, because I don't trust my emotions.
Yeah.
I almost always go to, like, it feels real.
Yeah.
At least, your emotions always feel real. Yeah. So I'm never trying to dismiss the feeling.
Yeah.
I just go, okay, this feels real, but is it accurate?
Exactly.
And then I go to, have I eaten? Have I slept? Yeah. What time of the cycle is it? Am I hot? As in like warm body temperature.
The cycle one is a really important one to bear in mind. It's something that we forget, but it does have a big influence on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then how do you rationalize yourself out of that emotion?
I usually in that moment go, you can't rationalize your way out.
Yeah.
So step back.
Yeah.
Like, do not react. If you're writing a text, do not send it. Like, I just remind myself, the sober Lisa, and I call it emotionally sober. Yeah. The emotionally sober Lisa would tell you, emotional Lisa now, to not send that freaking text. Right. So if you still feel like that tomorrow, if you still feel like this in 3 hours, send the text or say the thing I need to say. Otherwise, like, that's how I kind of work through it.
How do you cope with the emotion in the meantime? Say if you want to wait a day before you send the message, how do you remain calm in that
I think
day?
it's know yourself.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, I have to walk away. I have to shift my shift my emotions. So it's like, let's go listen to an empowering song. Maybe work out, maybe draw. So I love artwork. You know, some people love to meditate. So like, it's always in hindsight. So it's like having that list ahead of time to be like, okay, what's my go-to cheat sheet? Because it is very hard for me personally to get out of my emotion when it's happening. And so I don't beat myself up. And so now I just go, okay, was I proud of the person I showed up to be?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then I go, cool, don't beat yourself up. You're a person who grows and improves, Lisa.
Amazing.
So how am I going to go out and improve next time? So sometimes it's like I had an irrational response, I reacted to it, and now it's that time frame between noticing my reaction, my response, the feeling, and then the response.
Okay.
So, okay, Lisa, last time you reacted immediately, that's not good. Give yourself 5 minutes. Now give yourself an hour. Now give yourself a day, like, right, that I'm not responding. And now I can get more proud of myself as I go versus expecting perfection.
Amazing. Because, and I'm one of these people as well, some people just can't soothe themselves in the time between having a conversation and then resolving it. They just can't soothe themselves. What I try and recommend to do in that time, if you can, is write down what you're feeling, but also write down a response letter, what you wish your partner would say to you. And so if I'm feeling anxious, write it all down, what I'm upset about. What do you want them to say? Now, if you start writing what you want them to say and you realize actually there's nothing they can say because everything they're saying, I already know this, they're right, actually, they do say these things, I'm not listening to it. In that process, you'll realize if they're actually wrong or not. But if it's like, this is what I would like him to say, and he's never said these things, and he's never reassured me of those things, that's a conversation that you need to have. Rather than just all your anxieties and all your accusations, change it to what you would like him to do and what you'd like him to say, and then try and relay that to him as a set of almost emotional instructions, rather than just accusations. They're not useful. He's saying to you, I don't know, this is what I'm angry about, doesn't actually help anyone. But if I write a response letter, this is what I would like you to say, and then teach him how to love me properly, we can actually resolve the conflict for future.
Oh, I love that. Teach him how to love me.
Yeah, you've got to teach everybody how to love you, unfortunately. We think that if I have to teach you, it means that you don't love me. It doesn't come naturally. But unfortunately, we have to teach everybody how to love us. Even when like somebody walks into your house, you might have to say, can you take your shoes off? Doesn't mean you don't love each other. You're just teaching each other boundaries. Something in love is we have to teach the partner. If I like to talk to you regularly, talk to me regularly. If I like to know where you are and you like to know where I am, let's do that. If I like space, give me space. We teach people rather than expecting them to guess it.
Is that where we're going wrong now then in the dating world, where we show up to be someone that we're really not? Because I've heard you say that, I've got a quote of yours, that current dating is just practice for divorce.
Yeah.
So explain actually what you mean by that, and then let's break that down.
Unfortunately, what's happened in our culture, and particularly with the advice that we're getting online, and it's even in the form of memes and like funny things, is we're learning how to kind of get over people, how to move on, catch fights, not feelings. I don't take no nonsense. Be like this, be like that. We're teaching people how to become hard. So how to cope when relationships break down rather than how to make relationships work. So we're taught that, you know, if your man isn't answering your phone, go straight to the club. Or if your man is doing this, you make sure you find somebody else. Or don't this. It's constantly how to cope with when things go wrong. Unfortunately, we're not teaching people with how to actually create a connection. So we don't have to learn the skills needed for a divorce. So what that would look like is openly communicating what you actually want rather than being scared to come across needy. So I had a client the other day and she was like, oh, I really like this guy, I just started talking to him, but he hasn't like asked me to see him recently, or he hasn't labeled it, but I don't want to look needy. And I said, so what if you look needy? Who cares? This is about your emotional needs. Now, if you like labels and you want exclusivity before you get intimate, you say that. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, you've lost somebody who's not right for you anyway. You've speeded out the outcome of somebody who's potentially going to waste your time. So go in with effective and open conversation if you can.
Is it that people are worried about the rejection? Like what is happening right now in the dating world?
People are scared to give their heart to anybody. They're so scared because they're prepared for somebody to hurt them. They're so prepared that somebody's going to embarrass them, hurt them, use them, that they're scared to give their heart. So in the process, they're becoming somebody that they're not. So they're becoming somebody hard, strong, doesn't want a relationship, happy to just have casual relationships, when really from being married and stuff, but there's nothing quite like having a partner in crime in life. So unfortunately, they're becoming their own barriers to the connection that they truly want out of life. And I don't blame them. It's not an easy time to be single. Nobody seems to be wanting connection, even though everybody's craving it. Men are craving connection, women are craving connection, but they're not trusting each other with forming that connection, unfortunately.
So I'm actually glad that you said the men thing as well, because like, even though the show's called Women of Impact, like it's so important to me. Like I never want to put down men. Like I understand there are bad men out there that have been really freaking like just assholes, abusive. Like I am not excusing any of that. But there are also women who have cheated on their husbands, cheated on their partners, are total bitches. Like I am just coming from how do I empower women that really want to take the control, take their power back and feel good about themselves. Like that's what I'm all about.
It's a really hard time because you know what, and this is going to sound awful, but it's almost the best time to be a bitch as a woman. It's almost the best time.
Society tells you to.
Society has created the culture that rewards women who are narcissistic. It rewards women who use men for money. It rewards women who monetize their body and sell it, because what happens in those cases, those women know what they're dealing with. They know that they've got a guy who's a bit of an idiot. He's probably cheating on his wife to pay for my bills and this, that, and the other. But I'm not going to get too emotionally attached, and I get a house and my rent paid and a car out of it. That woman is now being rewarded. Now, the problem is that good woman who actually wants nothing more than to be connected to a man and create a family and create a home, she is now learning that that's not being rewarded by men, because society has sexualized men so much and created, their eyes are almost open for narcissistic women, because they're the women that, kind of are most provocative and they're always out there. So that good woman is getting neglected, particularly the high earning, good, successful women. They're getting overseen, unfortunately, in this day and age. But what I would say to them is do it for your own self-respect. You might get a great guy at the end of it, you might not, but I promise you will get good self-esteem as a result of staying that woman. Whereas when you become that narcissistic woman who's using men for money, who's not attaching to them and is just learning to get her bag and use it, it's fun, it's great, you stay protected, but you start valuing junk. You start thinking that relationships and men are only worthy if they can provide you with materialistic objects. And eventually you start to have the wrong values in life and you end up being empty. So if you are that good woman who's struggling to find a man, which I understand it's very difficult to find when you are that good, wholesome woman, stay strong for your own values' sake. Don't do it for necessarily you'll get the best guy, do it for you. You'll be the best woman you can be through that.
Oh, I love that message. So you're saying like this is a struggle for women, but I do hear that there's a massive struggle for men as well. And I think I'm going to keep repeating, I want us to understand men and how they think. And I understand there's a lot of toxic men out there. There's a lot of narcissistic men. There's a lot of men that are abusive. There's a lot of men that cheat. But there's also a lot of good men out there. So what is their rebuttal? Because all I hear, very rightly so, because I'm surrounded by so many women, is that Lisa, there's no more good men out there. And I don't actually believe that's true, because I also see these good men saying, Lisa, women are just using me.
Yeah, there are plenty of good men. Here's what's happening a lot of the time with good men is because they don't make their sexual interest in women so clear, the women don't realize that they exist. They only really focus on the man that's giving them sexual attention. The man that's actually more respectful and is a little bit more shy and stuff, we kind of forget that guy. So what happens to that guy, the good guy, unfortunately, what's happening to him is because he is respectful and because he's not so sexually forthcoming and he's the type of guy that wouldn't come up to you in a club and try and get you a drink and stuff, what happens with that guy is that he starts to feel rejected. And slowly in this area, unfortunately, the era we live in, that guy that keeps experiencing rejection then turns to pornography and turns to transactional relationship, because there's avoidance of rejection then. So that guy starts to then essentially become even more reclusive. So what we need to do is start rewarding the right men, just like men need to reward the right women. I don't encourage men to go for that woman who's using them for their money and who is, the most promiscuous. I encourage them to be with that good woman. Similarly, with women, we have to start rewarding the right men, the men that want a family, the one that want to settle down. The amount of female clients I have that cheat on their good husbands, that are just there to make a living, who just want to make her happy, for the personal trainer who's just got more muscles and has got loads of girls, they're willing to risk it all for that guy. So we as women also need to take accountability for why narcissistic men have such a monopoly over us. It's because they're the ones that we're attaching to. There are good guys that we're willing to step on to be with that guy that's not replying to our texts, not labeling the relationship, casual relationships only, clearly speaking to other women, clearly following all loads of types of women. Why are we rewarding that man by giving them our emotional investment? So we're creating the narcissist that we hate.
Why are we doing that then?
I think there's a part of us that believes that we have to work for the top kind of guy. If you want a sexy guy, if you want that kind of top guy, you have to compete, you have to work for it, you have to beat other women, you have to do that. But the reality is top men don't have the energy to be with lots of different women all day, every day. That's not what makes a top man. That's not a good man. A good man is naturally, he's like sequential. He likes one person, one thing at a time, because if you spread yourself thinly, you're not doing anybody justice. So what happens is we think that him having lots of options makes him more desirable. It actually makes him more lazy. What we want is that guy that's more responsible and is more fulfilling of his duties, because in the long run, that's the guy that shows up when we've got hospital appointments. That's the guy that will take the children to, basketball practice. That guy that we have to work for, he won't even reply when you tell him you're sick. So why do you want him?
Yeah, God. I remember on my first day with Tom, he took me to like this strip mall Chinese restaurant that had like a B rating. And I was like, when I first showed up, because I was young, so I was 21, I had such an expectation of what a guy should do. I take you to expensive restaurants. Yeah. And he was just like, oh, I really like their food here. Yeah. And so as soon as I started to see how happy he was at this restaurant and like the conversation we had, it actually flipped my mind into what I wanted from a guy. And so is that like a good place to start? To go like, well, who, just like, again, I don't want anyone to feel like it's their fault, but I do like to always take inventory of myself. Yeah, so would you recommend someone took inventory of the types of guys they go for, what resonates with them, and then flip it? Like, what's that?
What is it about the narcissist that had you so hooked? What is it about now? Even the fact that when I have female clients that come to me and say, my ex is a narcissist, I say, we're not going to mention that word, because what I want to do is undo the damage that created such a toxic attachment to a man that doesn't treat you well. Forget labeling him. That actually, what victimhood does is it's almost the same emotional energy as being a narcissist. Me being a victim for the rest of my life requires the same level of self-indulgence, self-pity, self-focus as a narcissist. What I want you to do is remove that label and replace it to, I made a bad choice because at that point in time, and I want you to complete the sentence. And then you won't repeat that behavior. But if you just say he's a narcissist, what will happen is you avoid the internal reflection it takes to avoid that mistake again. So try and figure out what traits in him did you find so attractive. Maybe you like somebody extrovert. Maybe you like somebody who's always asking for things because it makes you feel needed. Maybe you like something. Whatever it is that you are liking, make sure you recognize it comes at a cost. Do you really want that experience again? And then try and avoid it.
And I just want to make sure people really hear that message, because this is really powerful, like really powerful. But I want people, it's not about blaming yourself. No. It's just about identifying the things that had happened. Like, just like I had said with me, right? Like, I look back and I say, oh, I didn't show up to be the person I wanted to be. What do I need to change in order to do that? Yeah. So I think it's probably like the focus thing, right?
In your toxic relationship, you described it as you having low self-esteem. Yeah. He would never be able to run with Lisa today.
No, shit, no, fuck no. You're so right.
The world is filled with bad men and bad women, but if we cultivate an atmosphere of self-reflection and self-esteem, they won't enter our world. So I really want people to take back the control by focusing on themselves.
The message now is becoming even more polarizing, right? Now with like the red pill movement, where guys, I just heard the other day where someone told me that I try not to pay too much attention to it because I think it's all very toxic. Yeah, and it's just like, it's just getting worse. But maybe I do need to pay attention to it. But like I heard where it's like someone saying that the red pill community now is saying, well, a woman that has slept with another guy is like a used car. Yeah. And it's like, what? fellas, when you're starting to like compare women who've had the
Yeah.
sexual experience just like you've had the sexual experience to used cars, it's like, it's just become even more polarizing.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's such a stupid statement because the reality is, let's say we take an average woman and an average man and them shaming her for a body count. The reality is women tend to have to reject more than they select. What I mean by that is, let's say, for example, she's got a body count of 5 and this guy
And when you
has
say body count, that means how many
people they
with.
slept with. Let's say she slept with 8 men and he slept with 4 girls and he thinks she's such a slut. But the reality is she might have had 28 men trying to sleep with her. If she's still rejecting more than she's accepting. You might have just slept with every woman that you had an opportunity with. So how is that a fair?
That's such a good point.
The reality is you should, instead of focusing on the people that have many numbers, focus on her selection process and his. Same with him. If you are going to be with a man and think, oh, he's only slept with 8 women, so he's great, but has he ever said no to women? If he's always accepting any energy, men and women, if they're accepting any energy that comes into place, they haven't sorted their self-esteem out. Whereas if they can be selective about who they're engaging with, then it shows that they've got a handle over their sexual experiences. So it's not a number. It's about the ability to turn down sex. And hopefully that should be available in men and women.
Never even thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So what do you think about women chasing men then?
I don't see anything wrong in trying, but do not insist. And that's men and women. I'd say even with men, if you're trying and trying and she keeps saying no, don't push it. Don't push it with anybody. There's always somebody out there that will love you and like you for you. If you have to keep insisting, unfortunately, you're going to have to keep contouring yourself until he likes you. And it's going to become exhausting. So definitely put in the effort, show somebody some interest, show them some connection, but don't chase. If you can avoid it, try and avoid it. Chasing is slightly more convincing somebody to like you back. We don't need to do that.
Or what about the word pursue a man? Is that different?
What would you say is pursuing a man?
Or approaching him, like DMing him, let's say. It's like, hey, I saw you on Instagram. Are you interested to go out?
I don't see anything wrong in that. I don't see anything wrong with that. What I do think is wrong is when you don't accept the feedback. I think if you want to pursue, men, women pursue each other. We're living in a world where we don't need to be children. But if you don't accept feedback, that's when it becomes negative and that's when it becomes a little bit desperate. But if you take the feedback, oh, they didn't like me, no worries, you don't take it personal. But pursuing, absolutely, do what you've got to do. I don't think it should be so arbitrary, black and white. Sometimes we think it should be men and women, but sometimes it's the person with the higher self-esteem that has to make the first move. It might be the person with the higher boundaries that suggests, okay, are we going to label this? It doesn't necessarily have to be the person who's most interested. Because when I think about the men that have approached me over the years, I wasn't less interested than they were in me. It's just simply I didn't have the confidence to go up to them. So I don't think it has to be so black and white. Sometimes some people are just afraid of rejection more than others. So that can happen.
Fascinating. I love that mindset. So what is it that men feel like they need in a relationship and women feel like they need in a relationship?
I think for women, they need to feel heard and seen. They need to know that what they're saying matters and their presence matters. So if you're sat next to a man and he is on his phone the whole time, he doesn't acknowledge you, you're crying, he doesn't feel anything, you're happy, he doesn't show any attachment to you. For women, we start to feel very invisible because we love connection. We can actually put our phone away and talk to our partner. It's not a problem for us. We love connection. So when she starts to feel unheard and unseen, emotionally and physically, she will start to turn into a person she doesn't like. She'll become nagging, she'll become negative, she'll become bitter, she'll lose confidence. So being heard and seen is really important for women.
And passive-aggressive, I think, as well.
Passive-aggressive, yeah, unfortunately, we become like that. For a man, I think what he needs is, they always say respect. This is what the answer that men will say is that they want to be respected. What that looks like is a part of you checks in with them and makes joint decisions. What I mean by that is, babe, I've got this job offer. What do you think? Or, babe, we're having dinner tonight. What would you like? Just a joint decision making. They like to feel like they're involved in their partner's decision making and they are respected and their process is respected. What they really find difficult is when all decisions are made without them, they start to feel disrespected. That's usually what they mean when they say they're being disrespected.
I've also heard you say that men also like to be nurtured.
They do. This is something they don't talk about enough, but I think just even making dinner for them and getting them a cup of tea, I know it might sound aggressive, but unfortunately it's how they feel loved. They don't need long conversations all the time, but little things like having food is there, they automatically feel my partner thought about me when I wasn't there, and that means something to them. So I think it's something that internally, and I think it's evolutionary wise as well, it's something that makes them feel loved.
And it's fascinating. So I heard you say that in one of your videos, and I don't cook for my husband anymore.
Yeah.
And so after I heard your video, I literally went to him, and this is what I love. And I'm really hoping this video specifically with us is really hoping to activate people to have that communication with their partner. And so I said to him, I was like, babe, I just heard Sadia say that men want to be nurtured. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, but I don't cook for you anymore. And he goes, I know. And I was like, how do you feel about that? And he goes, yeah, I wish you did. And I was like, I know. And I was like, but babe, I was like, well, I've really tried recently, specifically over like the last year, to be more nurturing. And I said, but babe, like a week ago we went on vacation and I unpacked for you. Yeah. And I was like, but you didn't seem to care. You kept telling me to stop. And he goes, but I need you, I'm looking for nurturing in the way that I care about.
Right.
And that was like exactly with what you just said, where it's like to anticipate their needs before they actually vocalize their needs. And so he's like, my need wasn't for you to unpack. My needs are when I'm hungry, if food is just there, now it's like, oh my God, I feel thought of. And I was like, even with what we're talking about, there's so many small little nuances. And so it really helped me to then solidify even more.
Isn't it funny how they love being cooked for? It's so bizarre. I meet so many men, and even if their sister cooks better or their friend cooks better, they want their wife to cook for them.
Well, actually, I asked him that. I was like, is it actually me cooking? What if I ordered you food every single day to show up? He's like, I wouldn't care. Well, I wouldn't care as in that would be just as good.
Right.
So he's just like, as long as it's the fact that you've thought about me.
Even if it's just plating
I have
it
a
sometimes.
need, and you fulfilled that need.
Yeah.
His need isn't for me to unpack. And so I was like, oh my God, it was such a big aha moment. And so I really urge people right now to, even if you think that you're doing everything great, because I was like, oh, I will unpack for him, I'll do this. I was like, oh, there's nuances even to that.
Yeah.
And that then requires the communication to then articulate, is this what you mean? Or is this what you mean?
Weirdly, I don't know what it is about food, but knowing, even if it's a case of you've ordered food, but you plate it for him, I don't know what it is about feeding a man that makes them feel so loved. They feel so loved by that. So I had a client not so long ago, and he's been married for 10 years. And recently he went for dinner with another woman and, you know, having a potential affair. And he said, what happened is she just poured the water for me, and then she just plated my food. And I hadn't experienced that in so long. So it just went through. And I just thought, is it that? So for some reason, there's something about it. And it's not something, I don't make the rules with it. I know there's going to be girls that say, why should I? I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying this is what translates to love for them. For something about food ready for them, or you knowing what they like to eat, or you plating it for them, they just feel loved. I don't know what it is. It must be evolutionary.
Yeah, I love that you're like, I don't know why, but it is what it is. Let's just accept.
Unfortunately.
So then help me work through then being that independent woman. Because again, I think it's so damn important for us to really live the lives that we want. And you seem really freaking independent, right? You've got your own career and everything that you're doing is so beautiful and so amazing. But then how do we start to navigate being that independent person and still being something that our partner needs? And I've actually got a quote of yours, and I was like, I'd love to go down this rabbit hole. If you want that feminine masculine dynamic, you have to be sometimes you have to be the damsel in distress, because men take the foot off the pedal when they know you are financially stable.
Yeah.
What up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now.
How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 Steps to Becoming Confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
and this has been, I think, a lot of women's experience. What happens is, as you become so successful, and I've never been super successful, but just generally you can look after yourself or whatever it is. What happens is they start to think, oh, she can do it. Oh, her car's broken down, she'll fix it. Or she's got no petrol, she'll pay for it. Or her rent is due. For some reason, they sometimes just take the foot off the pedal when they know that you've got it. And whereas that same woman, when she is struggling, then they show up. And it's because there's something in them that likes to feel like the superhero. They like to feel like they show up and you need them and they help change your world for you a little bit. Now, unfortunately, when we are so independent, we don't give them that opportunity and then they get a bit lazy with us. Whereas if you show them that I'm very successful, but I still need you for this or that, be open to receiving. No matter how successful you are, whatever it is that you need receiving from, sometimes it won't be financial, but it might be that you need a phone call every morning, or it might not be this, but you might need help with your car. Whatever it is that you need receiving from, make that clear and give it to them. Give them that role to do it, because I promise you that they're looking for it. Even if they seem lazy, it's because they've been enabled too long. So whatever it is, try your best to receive. Don't think you have to do it all. And unfortunately, when we feel like we can do it all, we'll end up attracting people who take advantage. When you are that woman that can cover every bill and can do this, and I sometimes see successful women do this a lot, and they say, I want to go on holiday, so I just booked it for both of us. And I actually had an OnlyFans model not so long ago, and I won't mention any names, incredibly successful at what she does. But the problem with being hyper successful in OnlyFans is the man doesn't actually respect your hustle as much, because he thinks, oh, you just, take a few pictures and you make a lot of money. So she ended up paying all of his rent, his education, taking him on holidays, all of these things. And she basically just adopted a child as a result of this. And this is a strong, independent woman. She doesn't need a man. She makes maybe 100K a month. She doesn't need a man. But her desire was still to be loved in some way, shape or form. And he wasn't showing up in any way, shape or form. So what I would say is, if there are areas where he can show up, even if you can cover it yourself, give them that. Give them that, because you deserve it.
And is it specifically financial, or can it be in other ways?
Whatever your need is. I recommend a little bit of financial.
Really?
I recommend a little bit. Not entirely dependent, but here's the thing with men. They love what they invest in. So what I mean by that is, if they only invested £50 into Bitcoin, they don't care if tomorrow Bitcoin goes up or down. They don't care about it. If they invested 100 grand, they're watching every day what's happening with Bitcoin. They apply that same philosophy to women. When they invest a lot, emotionally, physically, resources, financially into a woman, they want to see that relationship work out. When they haven't done anything, they're lazy.
That's interesting. So me and Tom have built our wealth together.
Yeah.
And so we have the same bank accounts. I'm sure Oprah would have a heart attack. She's always talking about having separate bank. But we just came up together, very tight.
Yeah.
And but even now, when we go to a restaurant, I give Tom the bill to pay.
Isn't that funny that we do that?
It's so weird. And I, again, have zero judgment on other people.
Yeah.
I actually like it.
Yeah.
I really like going, you take care of it, babe.
Yeah.
And he likes taking care of it.
Yeah, and it's just nice that, when they check into a hotel, they do it their own thing. You don't have to think for a little minute. And they like it. They like it as well. Of course, you meet the men that are, that are a bit more stingy and stuff. But I just think if you are a financially successful woman, you deserve a man that appreciates that about you rather than uses you for it, or rather than punishes you for being that successful woman. So try and look for a man who looks for opportunities to care for you back.
Yeah, because I think that that's a real key, is that some people do, if you're independent, and I freaking love it, right? Like I so support women having their own financial freedom. I think it's super important.
Essential, yeah. But they get shorter end of the deal with men.
That's my point. It's like I would love to live in a world where a woman can absolutely have both. You can crush it at work, you can be your own independent woman financially, and yet still have the man that respects you, shows up for you.
And you know what's really funny? What they found in studies is that men, when they're with women that earn more than them, they produce more cortisol. So they're actually more anxious and stressed around that woman. And cortisol blocks your testosterone. So they're less sexually attracted as well. And so you almost get the worst end of men. They're almost angry around you. They don't invest in you as much. You don't get the best deal. So be selective with that. Don't kind of enable a man just because you're successful. Don't think, I want to go on holiday, so I'll just pay for all of us, because you accept the bad habits, unfortunately. It's, I want to go on holiday, but when I feel like he's invested in me enough emotionally, not necessarily financially if he can't, but somewhere he's shown up for me enough, then I can cover it. But if you give it to them too early, unfortunately, they take advantage of you.
Yeah, because I don't think I would care. Like if I was single right now and still had like my wealth, I wouldn't care what the guy was making, that wouldn't be important to me. It would be, does he still want to take care of me, like show up for me, just like I would show up for him?
Yeah, do his 100%, whatever that looks like. Whatever that looks like, whether it's like, you know, if he can only cover a quick takeaway, he does it. Whatever he can do is, but it would be difficult. If you were to, God forbid, ever be single, it would be difficult. How would a man be able to, you know, contribute to your life?
Well, to be honest, I would still expect him to pay for dinner.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's a dismissal to me as a woman. No. I don't feel like it's a degrade of me as a woman. And that's, I think, where the important line is. Yeah. So I don't think people should always think like, I don't think people should think like me. I just think, what is that thing that you want? And are you comfortable with it? Who the hell cares what other people think?
So what would you say to women that want the guy to pay, but then they don't want to do the cooking and they don't want to do anything domestic?
I think everything comes from reciprocation.
Yeah.
So it's like I would speak my needs to my partner, and then I would want them to speak their needs, and then we'd find a happy medium where we're both showing each other that we care enough to show up for each other. And so to me, if that looks like cooking a meal, it's like, and he's showing up for me, I absolutely would.
Yeah, because there's a complaint a lot of men that come to my for me for therapy say is I'm covering everything, I'm doing everything, but when I come home there's nothing in the fridge, or when I come home like the house is still a bit of a mess, but I'm doing everything I've been told by the red pill community to do. I've been told you've got to pay for everything and this that, and the other, but she doesn't really do anything in return, so I'm losing attraction. And so I do think sometimes if we're going to expect payment, then we have to accept that their way of being loved is slightly more domestic.
Yeah. Well, what I would do is say, are you listening to the red pill community, or you listen to your wife?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's also the point. It's like, what has your wife said that is important, or your partner? What have they said that is important to them? And if it is like, I really want to stay at home with the kids, and that's important to me, like I fucking respect that you say that to your partner, and they're like, cool, I got you, honey, I'm going to go out to work. But then I would then ask back, what is that thing that you're looking from me? Yeah. Because no relationship I can't imagine would work if it's one way.
Yeah.
Whatever that one way looks like, I can't imagine that would work.
On the man's side or the woman's side, it just doesn't work, because what happens is the giver, the person who's giving ends up feeling really underappreciated. And the taker, actually weirdly, when we take from people and don't give back, we start to dislike the person because we want to justify the imbalance. If I keep taking from somebody, it makes me feel a bit guilty. So the only way to feel less guilty, say he's so stupid, oh he deserves it, oh he doesn't even work that hard. So we end up being hostile to the people we take too much from. So that dynamic is actually not that healthy. But you know, in your experience of working with women, do you recommend being a housewife at home, or what have you seen?
Honestly, I really think it's whatever fulfills you. And when I talk about being a housewife, it was coming from a place that it didn't fulfill me.
Yeah.
And what I don't ever want to do is make a woman feel like her choice is less than someone else's.
No, and I agree with that. The only thing I found in my experience of working with people for therapy is when she became a housewife, before she fulfilled her potential, she starts to get a little bit depressed. So when somebody like, praise be to God, the amount you've achieved, if tomorrow you had to become a housewife, it might be okay if you had to make that switch to it, if you wanted to become a mum or something, because you've seen and achieved your potential. But say if you had never achieved your potential and now you're just, not in a bad way, but you are just there to cater to children's needs or somebody else's needs, it starts to create a slow depression in women. It's just that if it's itching at you and you're starting to fight with your partner and you're starting to get miserable, perhaps you've got unlocked potential that you haven't seen to yet.
Yeah, and I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on like just resentment and contempt. I think that is like, those two things are death to a relationship. Yeah. If you start to build any resentment, and to be honest, resentment to your children, resentment to your partner, resentment or contempt that they go off and get to do what they want. Well, did you have that discussion in the first place? Like when Tom and I first got together, again, we're not perfect at all. But he just said to me, if we're going to have children, I need you to hear I'm an ambitious man. And that means you're taking care of the kids most of the time. Like 99% of the time, you're going to... And I just, like, some women actually fucking hate that shit. And I'm just like, I appreciated it. I want to know now before I have the kids and then you disappear. I'd rather know now to then ask myself, am I okay with being the person that is staying home with the children 99% of the time? And if the answer is yes, amazing. If the answer is no, what am I going to do? And that's where I think, again, I just like to go back to knowledge is so damn powerful. And that's where we really started this whole thing, right? Is that when I talk about guys cheating or any of that type of thing, it's like, how do we as women get the power to then make a decision that's right for us. That's what I freaking care about.
Yeah, I would say that if you want to know whether a decision is right for you, is even if it causes a little bit of uproar, but at least you don't resent anybody, then do it. Yeah, if it's going to cause resentment to just do whatever decision, if it causes resentment, it's the wrong decision. Because resentment is almost like a frozen anger, and you're almost angry at the world because you've got this resentment. So any decision that can avoid, like for example, if you decide to, look after your husband's mum, for example, she moves in with you, but it makes you resent your husband, resent her, don't do it. Anything that could potentially lead to resentment, remove the possibility. It's always better to even feel angry, like a bit hostile. That's better than feeling resentment because it's hard to undo resentment.
What do you think about then contempt?
It's even worse, unfortunately, because it is the biggest predictor of divorce, because what it is almost mocking your partner's feelings and a feeling of disdain and distaste towards their feelings. So if they say something, you kind of roll your eyes and they almost become your source of hatred. Now, what kind of can undo contempt is taking a bit of perspective. What happens is we start to build contempt with people whose perspective we refuse to understand. If I see my partner's coming home late every day and I just build resentment and contempt towards him, I'm obviously going to hate him. But if I realize he's coming home late every day because he's got a good job and he pays for the kids' school fees and it enables me to live, my contempt turns to compassion. So if you really have a lot of contempt towards your partner, try and get perspective. Did they mean to be disrespectful? Did they mean to be hurtful? Or was their intention quite pure? If you can understand their intention was good, you'll end up removing the contempt.
Yeah, wasn't there a study where it's like, was it the Gottman Institute?
Yeah, they're the best, right?
Then they switch off the audio or something, and they had these couples come in, and just by their body language, the way they would turn, the eye roll, the tilt, the head moving around, they could literally tell what it was like 80%
They could predict your divorce just by you having a little discussion. And partners that stay together, they allow their partners to speak. There's a level of admiration and respect for what their partner has to say, and they listen. Whereas the ones that are definitely going to be divorced, every time their partner starts talking, they start to have, you can feel like their hostility rise. They start to roll their eyes. They almost want them to say something stupid, like, oh, you mispronounced that, guys, guess what he said? They look forward to mocking their partner. If you're in that kind of relationship, try your best to undo that, especially if you are the person that's doing the mocking, because it's disrespectful to your relationship overall, not just to your partner, to your relationship.
And I love that you just broke that down, because I do think it's important, because I don't think contempt happens overnight, right? No. It's that slow building block.
Yeah.
Like one day after the next.
I always had to clean up. I always had to pick up the towels in the bathroom. I always had to do this. It's slow and steady contempt that builds up. But if we take perspective and we just have to ask ourselves the question, did they mean to do this because they hate us, or it was just human error? And if it's human error, or it can be explained by anything other than hatred, try and err on the side of compassion rather than contempt. Because, for example, I'm sure Tom, there's nights where he's constantly working and stuff, but it's not coming out of lack of love from you. It's literally, there's a purpose. Similarly, there might be times where, they drop something on the floor. It's not on purpose. They think, oh, Lisa will just get it. It's more just completely forgot about it. But if you can find an excuse for your partner's behavior, try and look for the excuse if you can. As long as you're not enabling, try and look for a positive excuse.
But I love the signs, because I don't think some people even realise they have contempt for their partner, and I don't think people realise that their partner has contempt for them.
Yeah. Well, how you know is that something simple request turns into a fight. It might be like, okay, change the channel, I'm not watching this, and it turns into a huge fight. Or can you come with me to my mum's? It turns into a huge fight. When things have a disproportionate response, there must be contempt and resentment. So you judge it by the response to the cause of the situation.
That's so Homie, I literally could sit here and talk to you forever. Where can people find you and just all the amazing work you're putting out?
Oh, thank you. It's at Sadia Psychology on YouTube, Instagram and TikTok. I also have a Patreon where I answer questions and release some exclusive content, and you're most welcome to join that as well.
Keep watching to learn why they still cheat in a relationship.
I've known you to be the single guy that was out there. You've even said that you used to how many women can I sleep with? You've admitted that you cheated, fought, stole. You were like that typical jock, if you will. Mm-hmm. And now, sitting here in front of me is a man who is extremely open and vulnerable and attached to your heart in a committed relationship, very secure and confident. Yeah. So what the hell is it that you were able to do that most men can't actually do?
Face myself. Face myself on all the things that I was ashamed of, insecure about, and doubted within myself. And before I started to face these things, I was driven to succeed at all costs, driven to look good, driven to fit in, to belong, to be accepted, to be liked, to be loved, driven to compete, and driven to be number one. And that drive was coming from a wound where I was not willing to accept and fully love who I was and all the things I was ashamed of in the past. So I wasn't willing to face myself and take full ownership and responsibility, forgive myself and the other people in my life, and create new meaning around my entire life. And so it wasn't until I was able to do that, I was driven to succeed and I accomplished success. And I'm all for goals and dreams, but I accomplished a lot of big goals and dreams in sports and then in business, but I still didn't feel loved. I still didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel enough. So how much more did I need to succeed in order to feel those things? And it wasn't until I faced myself, and it's been a 10-year journey of facing myself. It's not like it happened overnight, where I realized that, there were a lot of things that I was driven by based on a wound inside of me, an emotional or psychological wound. Well, I lacked a lot of courage, emotional courage in my life. I had courage in certain things, but I lacked emotional courage in relationships, intimacy, whether it be business relationships, family relationships, intimate partners. And I lacked the courage out of a wound. And so I would abandon myself, what my values were, in order to please others. Again, family relationships, business relationships, intimate relationships. And when people would get upset at me, right? Yell at me, scream at me, get upset at me because I didn't do something they expected, whether it was communicated or not. I didn't have the courage or the emotional capacity to communicate of what I was willing to do or not willing to do. I didn't have the courage to sit in the screaming energy and just be like, okay, I hear where you're coming from, but I'm not going to give in to whatever you need. And so most of my relationships before the last couple of years, anytime someone was not happy with me, I would do whatever I could to create peace and make them happy with me. So I would abandon who I was. I would change who I am. I would adjust my lifestyle. I would adjust my business structure, whatever it was that they didn't like, I would give in to make them be more peaceful. I would do that in the family relationships. I would give in if they were upset at me. I would do this with friends. I would give in because I didn't want people to not like me. So I lacked the courage to be in the face of someone not liking me and to just say, well, this is who I am. And so I wasn't willing to accept who I was, nor was I willing to be around people who didn't accept me. I had to give in, I had to change, I had to shift. And so I would give in until I didn't recognize myself, until it was like, who am I? I don't know who I am anymore. I've given in so much for someone else's needs that I've abandoned my own needs. And when I started to be able to reflect on that and realize, this is why I did so many things that I wasn't proud of, or I did things that I would never do, or I did things that don't make sense to me. It's because I really felt trapped and emotionally insecure and without the emotional tools to just stand in the face of someone not liking me, is what it comes down to. So I've had to learn how to face myself, heal certain wounds inside of me that caused me to abandon who I was in every scenario, every type of relationship that would cause me to be someone that I'm not, caused me to go to change my identity to make someone okay with me. And I realized that I was repeating that pattern throughout life based on emotional wounds. And a little over 2 years ago, I started down the journey of kind of next level healing, because it's been a 10-year journey of healing and uncovering things. But it was 2 years ago when I realized, this still isn't working in relationships. I'm more able to stand my ground in business and family, but intimacy, I still wasn't able to do it. There was something missing from me.
Why do you think that was?
I think probably the fear of being alone, or the fear of like, will I ever find someone, that gives me the same type of thing, or the fear of Yeah, just, people speaking bad about me behind my back because I didn't give them what they wanted. Like every fear that I ever thought of happened, right? Okay, how can I end this relationship peacefully? How can I be in 100% integrity? How can I go to therapy with this person and say, I'm working on this, I'm trying to make this work? And my fear was, okay, if I end it, there's going to be a shitstorm. It's going to be chaos. She's going to be angry at me. She's going to be saying things behind my back, which has happened in the past. Some things may be true and some things not true. And so you can't control what other people do or say and how they respond. You can only control how you respond and show up in that situation. And after all this kind of deep, intensive work that I was doing for a number of months, it became clear that I needed to stand up for myself and be there for me and not always put everyone else first. So I was neglecting who I was and the things that I valued. And once I did that and started to get the courage on how to do that consistently, everything shifted for me. The fear is, what if this doesn't work out? What if people, make fun of me? What if people laugh at me? What if people think badly of me? What if this hurts my business? What if this hurts my relationships? But when I was able to face those things, it set me free. And when I said, I am good with me, this is my values, this is my vision, this is my life, and I cannot keep giving in to make one person happy in order to make me unhappy. I can't give in over and over and over again to try to create peace for someone who doesn't have peace within them. You cannot buy peace. You must be peace in all situations. And that means standing in the face of people being upset at you constantly for not giving them what they want. And I just realized that I had chosen poorly in all my relationships. All the people that I'd been with in the past, they're all fine people, and I wish them all the success and I'm happy for their journey. They just weren't the right match for me and I wasn't the right match for them. And that's why with Martha, when we met, I just said to myself, never again will I abandon myself for any human being, ever. It doesn't mean I'm not going to show up fully and give and, sacrifice and make big commitments, but I will never abandon who I am at my highest version of myself. And with Martha, as we were getting in, our dating experience before we committed to a relationship, I was so upfront and honest with her about who I am, about my whole past, and about where I'm going. And I'm not going to be in a relationship unless someone else fully accepts who I am. That means you have to accept all of me, my past, my present, and what my vision is for my future. And that means you can't change me. You cannot try to change me. But what I will tell you is that I'm on a constant growth journey. I do emotional coaching every 2 weeks. I will show up, and we also committed to joint therapy together when we got committed. I said, this is something that I want. She said, I want that as well. So we agreed on doing this together to just minimize confusion or arguments or anything like that and create agreements. And I said, I'm going to tell you the truth about everything, but you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it because I've told the truth to previous people and they freak out, they scream, they go crazy, they start crying, they can't handle it. So most women have shown me that they cannot handle the truth.
And when you say truth, can I dig a little deeper on what you mean?
Truth about who I am, accepting who the person is that they're with.
But what was it then in the past where people would scream and not accept it and freak out?
My priorities.
Because I'm picturing in my head, if I can just be honest, how many women you've slept with. That's where I just go straight to, because I
think women stress about hearing about past experiences of what men have done.
Yeah.
And if you can't accept what someone has gone through, then you shouldn't be with them. If you're always going to hold the past against a man, they can't be their free, authentic selves. They have to walk on eggshells. They have to maybe I shouldn't say everything then. If she's freaked out about one thing, I'm going to hide the rest because there's shame now associated to my past. And one of the things that's about the greatness mindset versus a powerless mindset in relationships and in life is when you conceal past pains, you are powerless. You are in a powerless state of mind. You're not in a greatness mindset. And so if you do that in intimacy and relationships, if you conceal past pains, you can't reveal who you are to your partner, that means you're a victim, you're afraid, you're living in a fear mindset, and it makes you more powerless. But when I am fully authentic about my entire past and I reveal everything at the right timing and pace and, all these things, not in the first day.
Right, you don't just vomit on them everything.
But when it's asked and I say, are you sure you want the truth? And she says, yes. I go, are you sure you want the truth? Because you may not want to hang out with me after this. And she says, why is that? Well, because based on my experience, no woman in the past has been able to hear my truth without freaking out, screaming, crying, throwing a fit, throwing a temper tantrum, making me wrong and bad. And no man wants to be wrong and bad. And she said, she had one of the questions she asked me was, after a few weeks of us hanging out or whatever, Lewis, what's your priorities in life? The priorities question that every man gets at some point from a person they're dating. And with Martha, I was just like, okay, we're probably not, you're not going to hang out with me anymore once you hear this. And we're probably not going to be, maybe we're friends, maybe not. And I get to be clear that not everyone is for me in the world. And as a wounded boy who didn't have friends and reinforce stories in situations that reinforce that belief that it's no fun to be alone and have people make fun of you and pick on you. Like that belief stuck with me until I started to heal it. And so I got to a place with her, I was like, man, this is an incredible woman. But if we're not the right match, it's okay. I'm going to be who I am and I'm going to be single and I'll be fine. And I was just like, I'll never abandon myself again. So when she said, what's your priorities? I said, well, every woman wants to hear that they're number one, that they are the number one priority of every man, and you'll never be number one. Now, let me give you context because that might be harsh if that's like a clip taken out of context, but I put women first before, and it never worked. I would abandon myself. I'd give them everything they want. I would change who I was to put them first, their needs, their feelings, their fears first. And that does not work. So instead, I said, I will never put one person first. I will put my health first. My number one priority is my health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. And that means that if we choose to be in a relationship together, you can never take my health away from me. You can never try to say, don't go to the gym, don't go to coaching, don't go to therapy. I don't want you doing this. You can never pull me away from my time. That doesn't mean I need 10 hours a day, but you need to be honoring my time for my health and be in support of me being the healthiest version that I can be. That's my number one priority. Women don't want to hear that. Number two priority, you won't be it. And women don't want to be not number two either. So women don't like that. They don't like to say, wait, I'm not your number one or number two priority. No, my number two priority is my mission. My mission right now is where I feel called inside of me, the voice inside of me, whatever it is, God, a voice, something calling me forward to do something that I feel I'm destined to do for this season of my life. And a man without a mission is a scary man. A man who is not on his purpose has more potential to be harmful than good. So you want a man on his purpose. You want a man at least having a clear direction of where he's going.
And that purpose can't be you.
It can't only be you. It can be a part of you, but
Right.
that can't be you. It can be, yes, I want to be the best father, the best husband, the best, leader I can be. Family is extremely valuable and important, but there has to be something else as well that he's doing to be of service to the family. It's from my personal experience. And so I said, my purpose and my mission is going to be my second priority. And I need my health to be number one so I have the energy and the focus to focus on my mission and my purpose. Now, that may change in 10 years. It may be change in 5 years. I don't know. But right now, this is my mission, to serve 100 million lives weekly to help them improve the quality of their life. That's the mission I'm on. So I need my partner to be full alignment, that you can't take me away from my mission. You can't say, I need you to come home at this time. I need this. Don't go to this trip. No, I need you to fully support and embrace, this is who I am at this season of life. And if you're telling me I need to change who I am in my mission, then I'm going to resent you. I'm going to resent the relationship. I'm going to get frustrated. We're going to have problems. So do you want me to be in full harmony and integrity in this relationship, or do you want there to be problems? The third priority is you. And here's the thing. I told her, I said, if you understand number 1 and 2 are my biggest priorities, you will feel like number 1 every moment. You will feel like you're the number 1 priority because I'm going to be so present with you. I'm going to be so appreciative of you daily. I'm going to give unconditionally. I'm going to support you and elevate you like you've never been lifted up in your life. If you understand, you cannot mess with 1 and 2.
Because you can't do that for her unless you do number 1 and 2.
100%. And so it's all around context of, and she knows that she is, again, she feels like the number 1 priority because she supports me in 1 and 2.
And what was her response to that?
Her response was, yes, thank you. And I was thinking like, okay, this is done. She was like, yes. She goes, I am so happy to hear this. And I go, I was kind of confused and thinking she was joking because every other woman I'd been with would like cry or be upset or be like insecure or, give me the cold shoulder for a day or 2 or whatever. And so I'd be like, okay, well, I'll make you number 1. It's like I would give in. She was like, yes, thank you. And I go, really? I was like, you like that? She goes, yes. This is incredible because I've never met a man with a purpose. They always made me their purpose. And I was like, no, but what's the thing you want to do in the world? What's the thing that calls you that you're supposed to go do every day? I don't care if you make money or not, but like at least be on a mission to do something. Sing, dance, create art, whatever it is, go do something daily. Don't make me number 1. Make you and your mission number 1. And they always made her the number 1 priority and it never worked out. And so for me, it's about creating conscious relationship, being very clear that we are coming together in alignment to serve one another, but to make sure that our health and our purpose is also a very high priority. And so I told her before I got committed, after I knew that she could accept me for who I was, about my priorities. So me being clear and honest and open about this is me and what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to change for you or anyone unless I want to change, but not because you want me to. I said, I want us to do joint therapy from the start. And our coach has been doing like 35 years of therapy and coaching. And she's like, I've never met a couple at the beginning do therapy together when everything was perfect on honeymoon. And I said, well, I just don't want to fall into the same pattern where, okay, 2 years goes down, you don't have the conversations you need to have. And then there's arguments and there's disruption and you've already intertwined so much. So let's minimize that and just try to create agreements from the start. So there's less confusion and distraction. And be honest about everything, about money, life, sex, kids, everything from the start. So we're in alignment. There's no confusion. And I also said, I want us to do that. And she was like, I want us to do that. So let's do it. So we both agreed on therapy together from the beginning. It's been beautiful. And then I said, before we get committed, I'm going to let you know that I accept you fully. And I had to ask myself a question. Is there any insecurity inside of me? Because most men, I used to be very insecure and jealous prior to 10 years ago. Something inside of me like killed the jealousy bug probably like 7-8 years ago, where jealousy left my body.
Where did it stem from originally? And then how did it leave your body? Because this is, Lewis, if we can help people with the jealousy thing, this is the thing that I think breaks up so many relationships.
I have zero jealousy. Like, to be honest, Martha can do whatever she wants and she can hang out with anyone she wants. We have agreements where she's not going to put herself in a situation that's uncomfortable for me, but I don't care if she takes a meeting with guys, if she's on set with like shirtless guys, she's making out with guys.
That's what I was
going to
say. People that may not know, she's an actress.
She's a massive superstar in Mexico. She can't walk down the street without people stopping her. Men want her, women love her. And she has the most generous, giving heart. So she's such a lover of people. So she'll take time and hug people and connect with people and all that stuff. And I don't know if 15 years ago, I would have been able to sit with that, knowing that there's all these superstar men that she's friends with and all these billionaires want to take her out on dates and everyone's offering her private jets to come around and hang out with her and go dates with her and celebrities and royalty. And I'm like, I could care less.
Okay, let's go down this rabbit hole because this is so strong. Because even with all the things that you even just repeated, right? Well, they were wealthy and they had good six-packs abs, and it goes to show the types of insecurities we have, right? That and mine is like, well, she had big boobs, she had a beautiful butt, right? So it's like the things that we maybe are insecure in ourselves, we see that maybe if they're around, they're going to find that interesting because we don't have it. So take me back to you even said 15 years ago. If that had happened, what would have happened? How would that have manifested into your behavior?
Oh,
and
man.
then where did it come from?
I think I would have just been so insecure and been like, oh, where are you? Who are you hanging out with? Like, show me the messages or whatever. I would have just been like very insecure. Very insecure and needing it to be all about me because I lacked the emotional tools and I lacked I hadn't faced myself yet. This is why it goes back to the beginning. Like I finally started to face myself 10 years ago. And it's been a journey of facing myself in many different areas of life that have taken time. But I think it was the fear of being alone, the fear of like not being enough, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being talented enough, smart enough, and there's going to be someone else that's going to make the girls that I was with, happier or something, right? So it all comes down to I am not enough. And it all shifted when I started to say I am enough. And I started to recognize how much enough I actually am and what I am willing to accept and what I'm willing to not accept and to be okay alone. I really had to learn how to go on dates by myself. And I did this for many, many years where I was just like, okay, I'm afraid to be alone, so I need to go be alone as frequently as possible. So I would go to dinner by myself in order for one. I would go to movies alone and sit by myself.
Were you uncomfortable as you're doing this?
The first few months of this, I was like terrified. I was like, what are people thinking about me? And do I even like my own company? And, all these things. And then I was just like, no, I would practice this over and over again. As I went to New York City, I would go to the park by myself alone. I would go on walks by myself. I would just like date myself. And it was one of the best exercises I learned. And it took a couple years of doing that until I felt like, oh, okay, the jealousy has left my body. And I think it was, 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago when I realized I'm not jealous anymore. Because one of the girls that I was dating, like, I can't remember what happened. She did something with a guy that was like, that maybe would have made me upset in the past. They were hanging out and I just felt nothing. And I was like, maybe I'm just mature. Maybe I'm growing. Maybe I'm developing, healing. It was kind of like a journey of all of it. And it has set me free. Letting go of jealousy has set me free. Because if Martha wants to be with someone else, then be with someone else. If someone is a better fit for you, why would I want to rob you of a better aligned relationship and a better life for you? If I don't provide that, that doesn't mean I'm bad, wrong, and not enough. It just means we're not aligned and we're not the right match. And that's okay. There's 8 billion people in the world. I'm sure there could be another person that would be a better match if she didn't think I was a good fit. So it would be on her if she didn't think I was a good fit, but I'm not going to change who I am. And that's why I said when we started getting committed, I said, I am going to fully accept you. And I told her, I'm not going to get upset at you. I might be like frustrated, but I'm not going to get upset at you. I'm never going to raise my voice at you because there's nothing you could do that could upset me. If I accept who you are at your core and we create agreements together, if you break the agreement, I know you're going to take full ownership and responsibility. We have flexibility. It's not like it's so strict. If you break an agreement or I break an agreement, we're going to take ownership. We're consistently growing together in emotional coaching together, and I do it individually and you do it. So as long as we agree on these terms, why would I need to be jealous? Why would I need to be upset at you? Why would I need to say, don't do this? And so I told her, I fully accept you and I won't get angry at you. And you can ask her. I've never gotten upset at her. It doesn't mean we don't have challenging conversations.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean there hasn't been sad moments. It doesn't mean there's been like letdowns from both of us. But we both are in agreement that we're in this together and we're in alignment together of how to communicate, conscious communication. Mm-hmm. So we set boundaries about when we communicate about challenging things. And it's a constant journey, but when I fully accept who she is and she fully accepts who I am, it's a game changer. And so I had to ask myself, okay, here's a massive celebrity. Here's a person who's done 40 movies, who's a superstar in Mexico and becoming bigger around the world. She's only going to become more famous. More men are going to desire her more and more. She's only going to be a rising star, especially because I'm just going to keep lifting her up and giving her more energy because I want her to succeed. So when that happens, And she's done kissing scenes and sex scenes, not like little sex scenes, but she's done movie scenes.
It's not porn, but it's sex scenes.
It's like intimate, like
Yeah, of
bedroom
course, yeah.
scenes with other men in the past. And I've seen some of them. And I remember being like, this bothered me. I had to really check in. And there's a little bit of ego that's like, that's my woman, right? That's my girl, and this person's doing this. But I had to, maybe that was for literally 10 seconds. But again, if I'm coming from my ego self as opposed to my conscious self, in my conscious self, I know this is art. This is an artistic expression. I also know there's 50 people in the room. I also know it's mechanical. I also know it's about telling a story. And she is a storyteller. So why would I change who she is when it brings her the most joy and love in her life? So I had to say to myself, okay, I know this might be a thing you do in the future. Do I accept that? When we have kids and you do that, is that going to be okay for me? I had
And
to
your
go.
kids turning around and saying, Daddy, why is mommy kissing
making out
that
this
guy?
guy. This like shredded 25-year-old, whatever, right? And so I had to ask myself all these future questions and say, will I accept and fully love her even when she does these things for her art? If she did it in life differently, that's a different story. That wouldn't work. But for her artistic expression, her vision for her life. And I was like, yeah, I fully accept it. And I also fully accept that she is going to take care of the relationship, that she's going to put herself in the right situations. She's going to choose stories that align to her life and our relationship. And if she makes out with a guy, then she makes out with a guy. And I would have never been able to say that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah. But otherwise, I'm saying I do not accept who you are, and I'm trying to change who you are. That means I don't fully love you if I'm trying to change you, and I don't accept you. So I need to overcome whatever I'm going through and say, yes, I accept you, or no, I don't want to be in this relationship. It's that simple. If you don't accept someone you're with, don't be with them. And if they don't accept you, then why are you guys together? Like,
have you worked through that? Because I love everything you're saying, but we all know there's a massive difference between, okay, knowing it and being like, look, this is your art form, I respect it, I support it. And there's a whole other thing, Lewis, with you standing there behind the cameras when your woman is just like really making out with this hot guy.
Yeah.
Because I hear you talk about triggers a lot and how you've actually worked on your triggers and making sure that you're unwiring your triggers. And so as you were talking, I literally go, I can completely see that you've done all the preparation work, that you're like, I understand why. But then when you're standing on set, the trigger, by definition, is a trigger, right? Where it overcomes the mental part and just gives you a visceral reaction.
You got to heal the triggers. I mean, this has been a journey for the last couple of years of really healing the emotional triggers that used to hurt me. And if something is triggering you, where there's an external event and you feel a reaction quickly, I'm not saying you can't be upset about something or be frustrated or not like something, but when it triggers you to react from a fight or flight standpoint, that means your nervous system has not healed a wound that was once opened. So when we have a wound and it stays open for decades sometimes, it's always going to be affected when someone's poking it or when something happens and it pokes it. This happened to me for so long. And it was a powerless mindset because I had wounds that I was unwilling to face and heal. So therefore, I was still a loving, happy, fun guy. But when I felt the trigger of abuse, abandonment, taken advantage of, I would get in this defense mode. I would get in this reaction mode. I would not be conscious in my communication. I would respond in frustrated ways. And it doesn't mean I have to like what's happening, but it's our response, which is important, and to be aware of our triggers. So really, there's nothing that Martha has done that has triggered me that I can think of, because we do emotional coaching individually and we do it together as well. We work on these things together. We process them together. We heal together. We mend together. And it allows for peace and harmony in the relationship. And I probably wouldn't be on set if she was making out with a guy. I wouldn't put myself in that situation.
Know thyself?
Yeah, I would just be like, okay, have a great day. And I wouldn't want to be sitting there watching it for like 8 hours, because it's a long day of doing that. But I would just trust her. I would trust her. And if she breaks trust, that's her being out of integrity. Just like if I broke the trust, that's on me. I would have to live with that. That does not feel good. I know what that feels like. She would have to live with that. That is suffering internally. Living a lie, being out of integrity is suffering. And the more you build that, you do that, you lose confidence in yourself. You lose the ability to be authentic. And so we had these conversations all the time. If she does something out of integrity, I'll eventually find out about it. And then we'll address it. We'll see if there's a way to process it together and make things work, or we'll move on. And we're both clear that that's what will happen. And so why am I trying to cling on to something and be so obsessive and jealous and possessive of a person? Because that's not going to help bring peace and love and harmony in the relationship. So doing that hurts a relationship, so why do it? If you're doing it to think, well, I don't want someone to cheat on me or to see another man or to be outside without me there, then it's like, if you aren't confident with yourself in the relationship, then you got to take a look at that. And that was me for many, many years in many relationships. And so this is not a judgment or make wrong of anyone. This is just, you got to learn to face yourself and know where you're at. And I don't see a world where you can do everything on your own at a high level. I just don't know any great athlete that made it there without a coach. When Jordan and LeBron and Kobe won their first championship, they didn't say, thank you, coaches, for the last 25, 30 years for getting me here. I don't need a coach anymore because I figured it out now. I'm going to go win the championship next year on my own without a coach. No athlete has ever said this and executed at a high level without a coach. Most people cannot do anything great on their own without support, coaches, mentors, guides. And especially when it comes to our emotions, I just think it's so valuable to have support, whether this is a personal friend, an accountability buddy, a coach, a therapist, a guide. I just think it's so important to have someone who can give you support and guide you through your emotions. That's why I've got a coach, and I see her almost every 2 weeks. Even when things are great, I keep going because I want to elevate to the next level.
I love that. And it aligns with your number one priority of
Yes.
making sure that you're very in tune, aligned. So you've actually mentioned multiple times about identifying the traumas from childhood and not feeling enough. If you don't mind actually sharing some of those,
Yeah.
because again, like the thing that, one of many things that I freaking adore about you is how open and vulnerable you are about your childhood and how important it is, because there isn't enough men. Like I sit here right now, I have a whole show called Women of Impact. So I'm always talking about all the things we've been taught that's actually hurt us, but we don't often ask the men. We don't often say, like, in today's interview, by the way, it's been so profound for me, because what I really wanted to do is show that even if there is someone's either in a relationship where a guy maybe isn't showing up the way that they want them to, whether they've dated guys and they've just been, dismissive, they kind of just use them for sex, whatever, it doesn't necessarily make them bad people. It may just make them wounded people.
100%.
And the way, if we can understand that and really communicate, I think that we end up bringing the genders together instead of it being, well, he cheated on me, well, she's a bitch, well, she's there's no more finger pointing.
Well, this is something I love to talk about. Not my wounds or anything, but I just believe a lot of men are suffering. They're suffering in silence internally, and they're causing loud noises externally through their suffering, through their anger, reaction, their harm, their just what they're doing in the world. Most of the mass shootings are from men, and these men are suffering. I'm not saying what they do is okay. I'm not agreeing with any of their actions, but I can see where it's coming from. I can see the anger and the suffering. And where does anger come from? It comes from a wound. It comes from a wound that has yet to be healed. And so when you feel so much pain inside and you have not figured out how to mend and create new meaning from past memories, that's when you start to react and unleash in different ways, whether it be in intimacy and relationships. You close off, you can't look at your partner in the eyes, you can't be vulnerable, you can't cry in front of your partner, you can't do certain things because you don't feel safe, because you feel afraid. So it comes back to the triggers. I believe that the wounds cause the most pain if we don't know how to mend them. So I'll briefly go over some of the stuff with me. One of my first memories is of sexual abuse from a man that I did not know in a bathroom. Babysitter's house. Her son was about 16 or 17, took me to the bathroom and sexually abused me. That's one of my first.
5 at the time.
It's 5.
Right?
It's one of my first memories. if you don't have a way to heal that and you just keep living life, that memory is going to keep replaying, or you're going to somehow block a part of yourself.
And how long did you not tell anyone about
25
that?
years. So 25 years of that. But it was also that stacked on a lot of the stuff. And this is not to say I had, more trauma than other people. This is not a trauma competition game. But just to give context, my brother went to prison when I was 8 for 4.5 years. So I would visit a prison cell, not a cell, but the visiting room, almost every weekend for 4.5 years. And so from 8 to 12 and a half, I really wasn't allowed to have friends. I didn't have any friends. Because growing up in a small town in Ohio, this didn't really happen in my neighborhood. And so other parents wouldn't let their kids hang out with me. And so I don't blame my brother for any of this. This is just the scenario that happened, right? And what I experienced. And it was all beautiful things for me for my future. But that was kind of tormenting, for most of my childhood until I was 13. I experienced a couple of these things. And I also just had a very unstable home life. My parents didn't show love to each other. I knew they loved us kids, but they weren't able to show each other love. And in fact, it was a lot of passive aggressive energy, a lot of yelling, screaming, slamming, physical fights. And so I just felt like I was afraid always, a low level of fear about what's going to happen to me. And I was in the bottom of my class, so I didn't have any skills in school. So I was academically just struggling. And so I was afraid to just stand in front of a group of peers without them laughing at me, because I really couldn't read and write until I got to be older. I still struggle reading aloud today. And so this is just part of the childhood that made me driven to succeed, to try to fulfill a hole in a wound inside of me that I was not enough. Again, there are 3 main fears that cause us to doubt ourselves in life, in relationships, in our career, whatever it might be. 3 main fears. And self-doubt, I believe, is the killer of all dreams. And these 3 fears cause us to doubt ourselves the most. This is the fear of failure, the fear of success, and the fear of judgment. And at the root of each one of these fears is I am not enough. And when we can go back to the memories where the wounds are that we have not healed yet, and start to mend those and create new meaning, then we can start to turn I am not enough to I am enough. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey of healing. And so 25 years, I held on to really all that pain, all the shame, all the pain, and those wounds drove me to be successful, drove me to get angry and be jealous when girlfriends would do certain things, drove me to be worried and stressed out, drove me to stay up hours every night ruminating, and I didn't know why. I couldn't sleep. And it wasn't until within days after I opened up about sexual trauma for the first time. Again, the powerless mindset is you conceal past pains. You aren't willing to reveal these things. That means you're ashamed. That doesn't mean you have to reveal them to the world, but you need to be okay with revealing them to someone. And when I finally opened up about one traumatic experience, the sexual abuse, I finally was able to sleep at night without staying up for hours every night. I could finally put my head down and sleep within minutes. And it completely shifted everything. And so it's been a 10-year healing journey of going back and healing different memories that caused me to feel resentful, angry, jealous, frustrated, shameful, all these things. And it's probably going to be a continual journey forever as life happens and events that happen and we create new meaning. But when I was able to go back and really, I did a process 2 years ago where I had a photo of my 5-year-old self on my screensaver for about 6 months. And I had a new relationship with my 5-year-old self, which might sound a little weird, but I parented myself the way that I needed to. I parented the wounds and the memories the way that I needed to back then, right now. And I would do sessions with myself, as weird as this sounds. I would do session with my 5-year-old self, imagining my 5-year-old self is standing right in front of me. I talked to him. How you feeling, little Lewis? What's going on? What are you worried about? What are you scared of? And he was able to express what he was afraid of for the first time, as opposed to holding on to it and just trying to be tougher and just figure life out. And as I created a new relationship with my inner child, I was able to hug myself and embrace myself and say, I got you. I'm so proud of you for how you overcame these things. I'm so inspired by what you went through, and you got us here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing what it took to get us here, even though you were confused and scared and not sure why you were even alive and not sure why these things were happening to you. Thank you. You got us here. I'm so proud of how strong you were. And now you can let it go. And I brought him into my heart spiritually and reconnected from a place of healing and wholeness. And I started doing that at my 12-year-old self when I would steal all the time, and started to have a new relationship with my 12-year-old self. So I had a photo of myself when I was 12. I did this with my 17-year-old self. I've done this all the way through to all the past 10 years up until now. And it has given me so much peace of going back and healing those wounds and creating new meaning around why those events happened. You know, Man's Search for Meaning is one of my favorite books with Viktor Frankl, and he lived one of the happiest, joyful, fulfilling lives after going through one of the most horrific things in the concentration camp. And all this comes back to is creating new meaning from these memories. It doesn't mean...
How do you do that though? Like, how do you actually go back? 'Cause, like, as you were talking, I was trying so hard not to cry because it breaks my heart to think about that 5-year-old boy right now and all the trauma he's having to maybe deal with, the shame, the not speaking up, that's going to be 25 years before he even recognizes it, that then has all these turbulent other relationships, lies, cheats, and blah, blah, blah. And we look at him as like, well, he's a problem child, you know, or he's just a player. And you just dismiss him. And I don't know the stats. I'm going to make them up. It's something like 1 in 5 guys.
1 in 6.
1 in 6.
Sexually abused, yeah.
And then how many people say it?
Very few.
You're almost like the only guy that I
few.
know has been so open about it.
Very few.
And so how on earth did you create meaning for that 5-year-old boy?
I mean, again, I don't think I could have done it on my own. That's why I had emotional coaches, therapists. I did meditation retreats. I did lots of different healing modalities. I mean, I've tried so many different things in the past 10 years, from breathing exercises to Wim Hof and cold rivers in Poland, to going to India for weeks at a time to study meditation, to neuroscience meditation with Joe Dispenza, to different therapists, to emotional intelligence workshops. I felt like for me, it's been a journey of each modality adding something to me and unlocking a new opportunity for growth. There's not some one thing that's like cured everything, and it's always a journey of healing. It's never a one-time moment. But the thing that has worked for me is the consistent emotional coaching every couple of weeks. And I see the power of preventative care, like going to the gym and making sure that the bigger my platform gets, the more opportunities I have for people to critique me. I want to prepare myself to not be emotionally triggered. I want to prepare myself for potential letdowns and not being exhausted for weeks because I don't know how to manage my emotions. And so emotional coaching and therapy has supported me in just constantly showing up for myself and processing it. Here's the thing, once you are aware of it and you face it, you've got to practice it, because the nervous system will bring you back into stress. And so I practiced this in a previous relationship where I was in couples therapy trying to make the relationship work. And at one point, I was like, told the coach, I go, I'm done. I got to get out of this relationship. I cannot deal with this stress anymore. It doesn't work for me. I'm done. And she was just like, I don't think you're ready yet.
To break up?
Yes. And I go, oh, does this person just want more money from me? You know, I was just like, I was like angry. I was like, but I don't want to be in this anymore. I don't like this anymore. And she said, I hear you, and we still have work to do. And if you get out now before you've really mended certain things, and you can create peace in the chaos, as opposed to running away from the chaos, but create peace in the chaos, not abandoning yourself in the stress, you'll probably, most likely, repeat the pattern.
Interesting.
The next person, you still haven't faced it fully.
And it needs to be in the relationship while you
That
do
was
it,
her.
huh?
That was her.
That was fascinating.
Strategy, right? And I was like, I just want freedom. I want peace. I want to get out of this. I can't deal with this anymore. It doesn't work for me. She goes, I get it, but you still are abandoning yourself in the relationship. So when are you going to learn to not abandon yourself? And just saying, I'm done without facing the problems head on. She's like, you cannot buy peace. You must become peace. So you don't have to stay in this forever. You're not trapped. You don't have to be in this for the next year. But you got to learn certain things in the face of adversity besides running away from it. And I go, oh, I'm so done with this though. I just want to be out of it. And I think it was probably the best thing for me. I'm not saying this for everyone, because I think if you are really afraid of your life, you should get out of a relationship.
Right.
Don't stay in anything if you are truly in fear. But for me, I decided to give it a couple more months until I was able to stand for my inner child in every moment in a conscious, calm way. So when she would scream or react or not speak to me for 3 days or whatever she was, or make me wrong or judge me or put me down, I just say, this isn't in alignment with what we've agreed to in our couples therapy of the vision that I have for our relationship, of loving communication. So I'm going to remove myself from this situation. I'm going to go in the other room calmly, and you let me know when you're ready to talk. But this doesn't work for me, for the vision I have anymore.
When you started to change then and talk to her in that way,
She fucking hated it.
I literally was about to say guaranteed.
She tried to punish me more for not giving in, for not giving her what she wanted, for not be like, oh, it's okay, I'll give you what you want. Oh, I'm sorry, okay, here's this, here's money, here's this, or whatever you need. She did not like me being a loving, passionate, wise man.
So how on earth, because you even said, like your therapist said, you need to learn how to create peace within chaos. So you're trying to create peace, but it actually then creates more chaos.
Of course, which makes you want to go back to your old way of being.
Yeah.
And I just was like, because I got to a place where I was like, all right, I am clear that this relationship will either work out the way I need it to with my vision of a conscious relationship, or we won't be together. And either way, I'm fine with that. And so I just got to be but I was like, but I will not allow myself to abandon myself ever again in this relationship or any relationship, because that's not working for me. It's causing a pain in my chest consistently, and I don't want this pain anymore. And so the more I did this, there was a period of time in therapy where this ball of pain that I had for years disintegrated.
And you're touching your heart. Was it really?
It was like right in my chest. It was like this pain that would kind of come and go. Some weeks it was more intense. Other weeks it wasn't there. It almost felt like a clenching in my throat as well, because I felt trapped. I felt emotionally trapped. And this pain was intensifying. And there was one day in therapy where it was like after months of, again, facing myself, of going back and creating new meaning, of reflecting on all my parents' behaviors and their model of love and relationships. That's where it all stems from. I realized that I was a free man, but I never felt free. And the first moment I met with my coach, she was like, what's your intention for our time working together? And I said, I want peace, freedom, and clarity, because I feel like I have none of it in this relationship. And all I want is peace, freedom, and clarity. And I wasn't being those things because I felt like I was a trapped human being emotionally. And it wasn't until I was able to mend and heal these wounds from the past where I became peace, free, and clear. I was becoming that, and it disintegrated. That old memory, that old trauma disintegrated throughout my body, and it felt like a lightness. It felt like I was free. So the next time these events would happen in the relationship, I would just say, I didn't have the trigger anymore. Again, the wound, when it happens, I'd be triggered and say, oh, how can I fix it? So now when a scream, an attack, a make wrong, a judgment, a blame came at me, I was able to see it from a different point of view. And I could look at it and say, okay, I don't like this. I don't like someone judging me or blaming or screaming at me, but I'm not reactive. As before, I was reactive. And now I'm calm because I am a free man emotionally. I am a clear man. I am a peaceful man. So I do not need to react and give in to one person who's blaming, making wrong, screaming at me, judging me, comparing me, whatever. All the things, giving me the cold shoulder, the silent treatment, everything that used to cause me stress and a trigger. Now I notice it and say, okay, that's just who she's being. That's who she is. And that's out of alignment with what I want to create for a conscious relationship. She knows what my vision is for our relationship. She knows what a conscious relationship looks like. And she's not willing to live up to that standard that I want to live up to now. And I was just being a stand for my inner child and my vision of a conscious life and a conscious relationship. And there are certain distinctions of a conscious relationship. And if someone isn't agreeing to that, then that doesn't make them bad or wrong. They're just not what I want. And that's okay. So it's learning to accept someone and say, okay, we're not the right fit, or accept them and say we are. And the journey of healing, it's funny, I got a message from, I was telling you before offline that I've been to many prisons, because I would visit prisons a lot when I was a kid to visit my brother. And I've been here in LA, there's some prisons nearby. I've been a few times because my book, The Masking Masculinity, has been kind of shared out throughout some prisons. And I believe that, when men heal, the world heals. There's a lot of men who are suffering and in pain, which causes them to do harm to others, causes them to do things out of alignment with the law and all sorts of things, and the harmony of human beings. And all these things get to be taken accounted for and responsibility for. But if we want the world to really evolve and change in a place of peace and love, then we got to get men to find peace and love within themselves and harmony. And I just got a message I did a speech to all the prisons during the pandemic about the mask and masculinity. They were streaming it live to all the prisons about these different masks that men wear that cause them to project an image in life, relationships, friends, sports, everything, business, to fit in, to belong, to feel accepted, and to feel enough. Because most of the time we put on masks as men because we believe if someone truly knew everything about me, they would not love me. If my woman truly knew this about me, she wouldn't accept me. She wouldn't love me. So we have this fear of not being enough. And I got a message from my friend Scott Budnick, who runs these prison programs for men. He sent me a text with a 6-page letter from an inmate who watched this. And the text said, I met this kid a couple years ago when he got into prison. He was 21. He was a part of a white gang, and he had a swastika tattooed to his chest. Oh, and he's been in solitary confinement for 2 years. That means you get an hour a day outside, and then you're alone for 23 hours. And he said, he sent me this 6-page letter. He just showed me a text of the letter. He sent it to me. And in the letter, he said, I dropped out of the gang. I'm starting to heal my heart. And he said, when he asked him why, he said, Lewis Howes and the Mask of Masculinity. I've read this book 4 times. I'm finally realizing why I was so reactive in life, why the things that caused me to react and do the things that I did wrong. So for me, the greatness mindset really stems down to learning how to navigate and heal your heart, heal your emotions, because these things work together. Our thoughts and our emotions affect our actions. And if we are living in so much pain, we're going to hurt our partners, our friends, our family. We're going to do bad things to humanity if we don't have love in our hearts and peace in our hearts. And so that's why, I'm on a mission to support all human beings in finding that healing and peace, because I know what's available on the other side, and I know how much pain and suffering it is when you don't have it. And like you said, 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused, but most never talk about that, let alone talk about any of their problems. And when I speak in front of rooms, it's usually about 50-50 men and women. And I'll ask the men of the room to raise their hand if they have one guy friend that they can open up to about anything. And if they talk about it once a month about their problems, their challenges, their insecurities, their fears, one. Most of the room doesn't raise their hand. Maybe a couple guys do. And I say, are you guys a part of a church group that meets like once a month? And they kind of laugh and say, yeah, where it's like a safe environment for men to talk about it. And I say, women, how many of you talk to a girlfriend once a day about your insecurities, your problems, your challenges, your fears, your doubts, your marital issues, whatever? And most of the women kind of laugh and raise their hand like every day, like a girlfriend or your mom or sister. Imagine doing this once a month. How would that make you feel if you just didn't talk about these things? Imagine only doing it once a year. Imagine never doing it ever. How would it make you feel if you never were able to share your fears, your pains, your insecurities, your challenges. How would it make you feel? And kind of all the women kind of like joke and laugh. They're like, it'd drive me crazy and I'd probably kill myself. And I'm like, you make a joke about it, but that's what men do. It drives them mad inside, and that's why men commit suicide way more than women. That's why there's 2 million inmates in prison that are men, way more than women. And men suffer so much more with addiction, drugs, alcohol, to try to deal with the pain and the shame and the insecurity because they are not able to speak it to one human being without feeling like this person will not accept me, they'll make fun of me, they'll laugh at me, they'll beat me up, they'll kill me, whatever it is. And so it's just trying to allow people to go through a process of, again, mending the memories of the past, because they're memories. And a lot of times we build the story up bigger than it was. I'm not saying it wasn't horrible or sad, but we tend to ruminate on the bad parts more. And when we can create new meaning and create peace from that meaning, then we are free. And so this has been the journey for me, and it's a constant journey.
Wow, that's so amazing. Oh God. Do you think that people can do that then while they're in a relationship? Because I'm really just projecting. Number one, I definitely think every woman listening to this, please, for the love of God, share it with your partner or share it with a guy in your life. Because even if it's a brother, right? Like, I just think what you're saying is so profound. And I so often take a female stance of like how we see things and how the struggles that we come with. And I've done so many relationship episodes where it's like, you know, the guy's broken my heart, or he's, you know, like took advantage of me, and
lied to me, and this and that.
He used me. And so, like, I'm very much about ladies, how do we make sure that we don't just give ourselves over without having some steps, without setting boundaries, like trying to really help women create boundaries for themselves, to what you were saying about it, right? Like to show up in integrity. But the flip side of it for the guys, honestly, I'm just as compassionate and just as empathetic. And I am so honored that you're talking about this on this show, because I think it hopefully will help us not necessarily, like I said, point the finger and go, well, he's just an asshole, right? And then having that maybe compassion. Now, here's the problem though with that. It doesn't mean that you should just let them abuse you, be a bad boyfriend, or, you know, have a
it may not be the right relationship anymore.
Right, exactly.
When I got clear that I got clear on what is the vision that I want for a relationship. What is my vision? I want a conscious relationship. And what does that mean? I want a relationship where when there is an argument or disagreement, we communicate consciously. That means there's no screaming, there's no passive aggressive energy, there's no cold shoulder for even an hour or days, which is what I experienced in every relationship. And I allowed it. So it's me, I wasn't living into my vision because I was wounded and afraid. And so the fear and the insecurity and the wound caused me to act out of alignment with my vision. So once I got clear that my vision is to have a conscious relationship, that means conscious relationship with myself first. That means I must be in full ownership of who I am first before I can have a conscious relationship with someone else. That means conscious communication. That means conscious collaboration. That means conscious agreements. It's not, well, if you don't do this, then it's over. It's, what are we agreeing to together? And can we have even a third party witness our agreements so that no one can say, I never said this 2 years later. Oh, actually we did, and we agreed on this. As opposed to, this is the way it is, and it's my way, the highway. Okay, well, if that's what someone else agrees to, cool. But this is a conscious relationship. This is the vision I have for my relationship. And you may be in a relationship that doesn't work, and you can still heal in the relationship and create conscious relationship together, but you may find out you're not the right match for each other. And that's hard to face. I'm not telling people to break up, but what I am saying, if you're single, make sure you develop a conscious relationship with yourself and get clear on your relationship vision. I got super clear that this is the relationship I want to have before I met Martha. I said, this is what I want. This is what I'm creating. This is what it will take from me. You know, if I want to be create this, I need to become it for myself as well. And then I need to be so clear that this is my boundaries and I'm not going to abandon myself. And so I was saying all these things with Martha when we got into our relationship. And she was like, I love it. This is amazing. And here's where I'm coming from. And I said, cool, I accept that. But if she was like, I want to have a different lifestyle, or I want to live in, I don't know, Mexico full time, I'd be like, well, our lifestyle isn't in alignment with my vision. That doesn't mean you're a bad person or, something's wrong with you. It just means we are out of alignment. And so can we create an agreement? Am I okay with living in Mexico a month out of the year? And I have to check in and not abandon myself. If I'm not, I shouldn't be in this relationship.
Isn't it funny how we convince ourselves that one of us is right and one of us is wrong?
It's not about right and wrong. It's about, are we aligned and a good match?
But we do, though, in those moments, if we haven't done the work like you're saying,
Yeah.
of course, it ends up going to, but this is what I want. And
We do that because we're afraid to be alone. And we want the other person to just give into our fears and our needs. This is what I need. And if they're not going to do that, they don't care about me. They don't love me. They're not here for me. They're selfish. And then we live in manipulation of someone else because we're afraid and insecure. As opposed to just saying, okay, that's not what they want for their life. That's okay. 8 billion people, you don't need to force one person into your way. And I'm not saying like everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to be smooth the whole time, but it's finding as many agreements as possible to minimize frustration, to minimize arguments and anger and upset. That's all it is. It's just being clear on here's my expectations and what I want to create. Is that your expectation? Cool. Now we have an agreement around this thing together. So we're clear. There's less stress around it. And I think a lot of people just don't have those conversations. And then, oh, they didn't do this for me and they didn't do this for me. And it's like, are they supposed to? Were you clear about this?
that's so true. You actually mentioned manipulation. How much did you have to look at how your girlfriends were manipulating and you manipulating them? It maybe inadvertently sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure we are both manipulating each other. Again, when you're wounded, you're in some type of, I don't think it was like intentional manipulation. It was like wounded and your fears are just causing you to be less conscious. And so you need to protect yourself. You need someone to not do something they did so you feel safe. It's a form of manipulation because you're not comfortable with who you are. So you're needing someone to change to make you happy. Where I don't need Martha to change at all. I am happy. She is happy. We come together to add to our happiness. But when we get in a relationship, not being a happy human being and expecting someone else to do everything in order to make us feel safe and protected and meet our needs, that's just the wrong way of going about it. We need to meet our own needs and fulfill our own happiness and support the other person in their needs, but not be their needs. That is a recipe for pain.
Dude, that's so powerful. And this is the one thing that I'm like repeating over and over. It's like, no, you may not need a man, but you want a man.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you just say what you want? And right. And it's like, we so worry about if I say that I need something, am I appearing needy? So that means I shouldn't ask for it at all. But instead, like, just actually own that you want it.
Yeah, I think exactly. It's not about needing. I don't need a relationship. I want a conscious, healthy, loving, abundant relationship. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So that I'm not going to jump into a relationship that isn't that. I'm not going to be in that. Again, it doesn't mean there's not going to be adversities of life.
Right, sure.
But the intention is to build a relationship that wants to create that. That is the vision of our relationship. If I needed a relationship to feel loved, then that's the wrong way to go about it. I get to feel loved and be loved first. I get to love my life first. And I didn't fully love myself in previous relationships, and they didn't fully love themselves. And so we were just two wounded people in every relationship of, I need this, you need that, you don't make me happy, I'm scared, you're jealous, because we're wounded. And so it's just a process of, and maybe that works for people, but that's just not what I wanted anymore.
Is that where the fireworks come from? Because there's so many people in relationships, and you're smiling because I'm guessing that you've had this, where it's like, it's when you argue, it's shit is hit in the fan, the house is burning down, and then as soon as it's over, you make out and you have sex like rabbits, and then
you sweep it under the rug and you repeat it 2 weeks later.
Exactly.
Man, it's just a lot. I mean, again,
Is that the wounds,
I raised
though?
my hand because this was most of my life. So I have compassion and empathy because this is who I once was. But it's just a lot of trauma bonding. And there's a lot of heightened emotions when there's traumas that you're bonding to with someone else, or when someone is there to fulfill a trauma that you need fixed, a hole that you need filling. And if it doesn't be met consistently, then it's more trauma and more energy and more fighting and explosion. But what I've learned is, for me, that doesn't bring harmony to my life. When there's explosions and fighting and fires, that is not harmony. You're burning yourself down emotionally, up and down, up and down. It's a lot of wasted energy. It's exhausting. And it's not the life or the vision I have for a conscious relationship. Again, if that's the relationship and the life you want, then know that comes with certain consequences. That comes with arguments, that comes with mistrust, that comes with your partner going out and you being jealous and insecure and then fighting and then making up and this whole cycle. That's just not the life I want anymore. It's wasted energy. And when you're clear on your mission and your purpose, which is the first step in my book, which is about getting clear on a meaningful mission, you want to eliminate anything that doesn't support the mission, because you realize I could be gone any moment. This life can be fractured in any moment. And why am I wasting so much energy going up and down with one person where we're out of alignment? It's really about alignment. Doesn't mean they're wrong or bad. Doesn't mean they're right and good. It means, are you aligned? And do you want the best for the other person? If you want the best for them, why would you get upset at them? Why would you scream at them if you want the best for them? If you truly love them in a conscious level, why would you scream consistently and say, you did this wrong? This wrong to what? Unless you've agreed on it, there's nothing wrong. Them living their life. So if they did something, if Martha cheated on me, I would not scream at her. I would be sad, I would be hurt, I would be disappointed and let down. I'd feel a wide range of emotions. But what does screaming do for me? What does it do for the moment? What does holding a grudge against someone do for me and my mission? It pulls me away from my mission. It pulls me away from my health and my harmony with myself. I may have moments of needing to release and let go. I may need to process it. I may need to, do my own techniques to really get out the emotion of anger or sadness or frustration. But me screaming at someone over and over for what they did to me, that only goes so far. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, is it useful towards my life? And I want peace and harmony. That is my highest currency, is peace, harmony. And it's just creating a life that supports me with that as much as possible.
So I've processed all of this as well. And I used to be the girl that when in my first relationship before Tom, I was with a guy for about 3 to 4 years. And it was very manipulative. It was very, like screaming and then, the hot sex, all of that stuff. And so what I realized was when I started to do the work, like what you're saying, right? You start to get utter clarity in your behavior, in how you're showing up. And then you start to go, well, why am I doing that? And so when I met Tom and we started really working on our relationship and he was the man for me, I realized that I was using crying and tears as a manipulation. Yeah.
It's true.
And I realized that. And so what I started to do is I actually started to walk out of the room when I started to cry, to the point where he's like, babe, why can't you cry in front of me? And I would say to him, because in a moment where we're arguing, if I was upset about something else, I'd happily cry in front of him. But in the moment of me and him arguing, my emotional state says cry. But in that moment, I know what it's doing to him. And the truth is that I don't want him to back down because he feels bad that I'm upset.
Because then he's got to give in and take care of you.
Exactly. And I know that doesn't serve our relationship. So if I know that him backing off doesn't serve our relationship, I don't want to manipulate him with my tears. So I've said to him, sometimes I actually need to walk away so I can cry, so I can process how you've impacted me. And then I can come back and articulate it to you instead of using the tears to kind of make you act in a certain way.
I think that's wise. And I also want to point out that, you should be, I think women should be open to cry in front of their men. Of course,
yeah, absolutely.
But I think when it happens on like every 3 days because you didn't get something you wanted and there's a breakdown, then it starts to feel like a little bit manipulative in that sense where the man doesn't feel like he can actually say what's on his mind. He just has to take care of you. And he wants you to be happy. You know, the man wants you to be happy. He doesn't want you to be sad and crying.
Right.
No man lives their life thinking, I hope my woman cries today and is mad at me.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. It's not an intentional act. And so, and I know from our last conversation, you know, you said you hadn't cried in a long time. This was about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Year and a half ago, I think. You were like, I haven't cried in a long time. I think you said, I don't remember the last time I cried.
I've really been working on it. And so I've really, like, even on this episode, I was allowing myself, but it's a conscious effort. It's a bloody conscious effort.
Well, when you block something for so long, you got to be conscious about it.
Yeah.
You got to allow yourself to feel.
I think part of it also was my ex-boyfriend, where I was like, no man's ever going to see me cry
Never
again.
gonna hurt me again.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah,
No.
100%.
And how's that show for you?
Yeah, it didn't quite
How's
work,
that working
right?
for you?
So
I mean, it works in certain external results, but it doesn't give you the internal harmony that you truly want long term.
Oh, okay. So here's the truth. As a businesswoman, it does serve me.
100%.
It serves me to be able to regulate my emotions. And in my personal life, I've used it to then be able to serve me, the emotional regulation thing. So that is super important. But then let's talk about also guys. Sometimes it serves guys to walk in and be an alpha male and to be strong and to put your chest out, right? Depending on what you're trying to achieve, it could be useful. Football, right?
Yeah, of
you
course.
walk out on the pitch. If you walk with your head like hung and you kind of don't look confident, you're losing. So I understand why it can actually serve you. But also, it then can absolutely not serve you with, if you walk into a relationship, right, with your chest pushed out and you do that with a woman, I think that would end up causing some friction and, you know, intimidation, which I don't think is healthy.
Well, here's the thing. I've heard so many times over and over again that women want their husbands or their partners, their men in their lives, to be more vulnerable with them. I've heard this many, many times over the last 5-6 years since I got into the masculinity work. And then I would be, you know, men would come to me and say, okay, Lewis, like I'm going to go and I'm going to finally be vulnerable with my wife. She's been asking me for years that I'm too closed off. I'm too stoic. I don't show emotion. I never am sensitive. And I've always felt like I've had to protect the family. I've had to make sure I'm taking care of things and making sure she's taken care of. And I've got to be in a different state. I can't be sensitive in those moments, but I'm going to try it. And then they go and try and they let their guard down in sense of opening their heart. They start to feel a little sensitive, or when there's a breakdown, they allow themselves to process and cry in front of their woman. And a lot of them have come back to me and said, she's not able to receive it with me being vulnerable. She can't see me cry. It turned her off. She felt afraid. She felt like I wasn't protecting her and all these things. So when a man feels like a woman is actually going against them when they're being vulnerable, they're going to say, never again am I going to show vulnerabilities with my woman again. If she can't handle it, why would I do this? She's been telling me for years she wants this. I'm doing it and she can't handle it. Then men were going to go back into, I'm just going to take care of things. I'm going to be the protector and provider, and I'm not going to show emotion. And so I also think it's important for women to really take a look in the mirror and say, can I receive my man if he cries in front of me? Mm-hmm. Can I receive him? In a previous relationship, I cried once and she laughed at me. And I remember saying, thank God I'm confident enough in myself that I'm going to keep crying. In a movie or in a sad time or whatever, I'm going to keep crying because I don't care if she cries at me. I don't care. But if I wasn't at a place where I was confident in myself yet, I'd be like, okay, I'm never going to cry again. Oh, you're right. If you're laughing at me, why would I cry? And so you've got to be, I think women get the opportunity to be conscious as well and say, could I truly, if my man of 10 years that I'm married to, or my boyfriend of 2 years who I've never seen cry, if he cried, I mean like a little tear or an ugly cry, could I be a loving presence for him? And would I actually love him more? Would I be more turned on? Would I be excited about having an emotionally evolved man in my life and not just a single emotion man? Mm-hmm. Would that excite me or would it scare me? And if it scares you, then you got to take a look in the mirror because you're influencing. I'm not saying it's a man's responsibility, but you're influencing a man to be closed off more. And more closed off men cause more harm. So you just got to ask yourself, what is inside of me that isn't isn't allowing for a man to be emotional in front of me. And I get it's all timing and situations, and you want to be aware of that, but just ask yourself that. Again, it's not right and wrong, but if women want men to be more emotionally vulnerable and sensitive, they've got to be able to receive it with care and not make fun of them, not look down on it, and not think they're weak when they're sensitive.
God, this is such a trick. I thank you. I love this conversation because it's very tricky. I can actually imagine in that moment, right, where the woman is like, she laughs at you, like, we can dismiss her. What a fucking bitch. Like, how can she be so mean? But at the same time,
I have compassion for it too.
What if she was brought up with a father that was super stoic, and
I
in
have
that
complete
moment
compassion.
where she's just actually like, oh shit, I don't know how to respond, and her reaction of laughing is automatic, but not because she actually finds it funny.
It's funny because we had a conversation, like, I don't know, an hour afterwards, and she goes, listen, I know I'm not supposed to laugh and think it's weak, but just I've been so conditioned to think that a man crying is weak. And I was just like in shock that you cried. And again, it doesn't mean it's okay or it's right or any of these things, but I am able to look from out of myself and have compassion for that, because I know that her father left her when she was younger and she never felt like she trusted any men. And all these things. So it doesn't mean it's okay, and it doesn't mean it's, but it's just, all right, this is where you're at in your level of your relationship and how you respond to vulnerability. And it was another reason why I was like, okay, this relationship isn't for me, you know. This happened in multiple previous relationships. You know, it's like when I would be vulnerable, I would get made fun of, laughed, or wouldn't be received well by almost every woman that I've been with. And so, again, why would men open up and be vulnerable if they're going to get laughed at, if they're not going to be received well, if they're going to be made fun of? It doesn't feel good. And so I'm calling out to all women listening and watching. Figure out what it is inside. I know you say you want your man to be more sensitive and vulnerable, but when it happens, you've got to really honor the space. Honor the sacredness of your man being vulnerable if he's never been vulnerable. Lean in, comfort him, guide him. You don't have to say anything. Just hold him, touch him. Say, I'm here for you. I got you. You're safe. Because a man doesn't feel safe typically when he's vulnerable if he's not been trained on how to feel safe in that environment. So allow your man to release decades of pain in front of you. It might be a small tear. It might be a moment of something, but that moment could open his heart and start the process of healing and bringing harmony to the relationship.
God, I think it's because, if I can just project of why women may get uncomfortable when a guy is vulnerable, because I actually think it's very important. There's so much fear that we've been conditioned as women to see men as the stoicness, as the person that's going to save me. Now, here's the tricky thing, Lewis. I absolutely want my husband to save me. Someone's breaking into the house. So
100%.
So
it's situational.
Yeah, but
you want to feel safe when there's, an attack.
Yes.
But when there's a sensitive moment and you're on the couch and there's something coming up for you, there's no one attacking you, you've got to allow the man to let his guard down and be vulnerable.
Correct. And I think what we end up doing is going, oh, he's vulnerable. Shit, he can't save me from the person.
He can't take care of me. He can't pay the bills. He can't provide for me, all these things.
And here's the thing. It's not, I think it's just the confusion we have that it has to be one or the
100%,
other.
I get it.
Even when I talk to Tom about my own career, right? It's like I was a stay-at-home wife for 8 years. I was taking care of him, putting clothes out and cooking for him. I wanted 4 children. And now I don't cook for him at all and I never do the laundry. So it's like I had evolved, but what he prided himself on is that we're the couple that can navigate changes, but also navigate masculine and feminine to the point where if you think of masculine and feminine as being a spectrum, right? I'm actually more in the middle. I can bounce between being more masculine and being more feminine. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. And so can Tom. And so because we both can, we actually understand when he's standing in his feminine or he's standing in his masculine, and then vice versa. And now it's not an either or. It's not, well, hang on a minute. If he's vulnerable, it means he can't protect me. Or if he's protecting me, then he can't be vulnerable.
Exactly. And I think, women just got to learn how to process that and receive that and know that. Now listen, if your man's like in breakdown every day and crying constantly, then you may be some concern there and he may need some support in getting out of that. But just the normal range of emotions that human beings have, and laughing, loving, crying. If you don't feel like you're capable of doing that, you're shutting something off inside of you. If you don't feel safe with your most intimate partner who's supposed to love and accept you the most, if you're not accepted by them, then who in the world will accept you? So imagine the fears and insecurities that are tied to that if the person you give the most trust to cannot receive your emotions. And I'm not saying screaming emotions and hysterical emotions and anger emotions. I'm saying like your vulnerabilities, your sadness, like your fears, you know what I mean? And I just think that's something we can all work on. Men receiving their women better, women receiving their men better. But it starts with looking at yourself, facing yourself first.
And especially if you, like your story where you were saying that you were brought up with parents that weren't necessarily like emotionally intelligent enough to be able to help guide you. And I believe they were 20 years old when they had...
They were 19 when they had my brother. I mean, again, they didn't know how to love each other.
So thinking about that, and then thinking about you as this little 5-year-old Lewis, anytime if you even became vulnerable, I can only assume you were either mocked, put down, for...
I was very sensitive growing up, but then I would be made fun of, laughed at, picked out in school and sports. And that caused me to say, I want to fit in, I want to belong, I want to be accepted. So it means I got to be tough, I got to be strong, I can't show emotion. And I almost need to dominate others in sports to show how worthy I am, right? So I need to be bigger, faster, stronger. And when I tackle someone, I need to really make them feel pain so that they never want to get up. When I, dunk on someone, I need to make sure that I give them an extra elbow when I fall down to make sure they don't mess with me. Whatever it is, I need to make sure that I have full force and dominance in sports. And this win-lose mindset is always a lose-lose. There's no winner in that. I don't win anything from that. I might win the game, but I lose the lesson. And I lose my harmony and my peace inside of me. I might make a lot of money and build a business, but then at what price to my peace and to my harmony? And so my whole goal is to figure out how to keep unwinding this, because it's going to be a process forever. I'm going to continue to make mistakes. I'm going to continue to be out of integrity, but the goal is to stay as conscious as possible, have the accountability and the support as frequently as possible to stay on track and stay in harmony.
You had a quote that really hit me, and it's really important again that I understand men and where they come from. And this quote really hit me. The problem is that toughness doesn't stop, and it grows like cancer until it strangles all other feelings. I was like, oh God, I've never thought of toughness as being like that. And then with everything we're talking about, understanding when you were younger, the vulnerability, you were teased, mocked, bullied for it. Okay, so you got tough. And now in that toughness...
And then I had a lot of anger.
But I'm sure in those moments, people are now showing you more respect. They're kind of like getting more, quote unquote, in line. And so the toughness is actually teaching you a lesson, a false lesson, but it was teaching you a lesson. And then in that journey for 25, 30 years, no wonder your feelings were strangled.
Yeah, I was out of integrity with myself internally because I was getting external results living one way, but not getting the internal results of peace and harmony and alignment. Because I was living in anger, resentment, and a lack of forgiveness from all the things from the past. And a feeling of, I'm never gonna let anyone abuse me, take advantage of me, or abandon me again. So if this ever comes up and I'm triggered, I'm gonna block myself so it never happens. As opposed to just saying, life is going to happen. People are going to do what they do. I can interpret it as abandonment and abuse, or I can interpret it as something else of this and not take it personally. And I can create new meaning from the events that are occurring. It doesn't mean I have to like something. I might be disappointed still, but I don't need to be angry about it all. That doesn't serve my mission or my health. So again, I go back to priority 1 and 2, health and mission. If it's not useful for my health, why am I allowing it to consume and create a cancer inside of me? So again, doesn't mean I'm this perfect human being. I'm going to be upset and angry at times, but it's allowing me. That's why I have coaching and accountability every couple of weeks to get me back on track, to process it, to talk about it, Let's get it out. I didn't like this thing. Okay, let's get it out and get back to the vision. Get back to your mission. Get back to who you are, which is a loving, passionate, wise, conscious human being. And that takes consistent practice.
Click here right now to learn why a woman must never pursue a man and the power women have in walking away.
And he rejects her, something is broken in her. And she'll leave that club. And in her mind, she will have a sense of inferiority.